Welcome back to CN Live's live coverage of the 2020 U.S. presidential election. It's still not over, a day after Election Day Tuesday. Hello, Elizabeth Voss in Arkansas. How are you?
I'm doing well. Happy to be here. Not surprised that we don't have a final result yet.
Right. We got some sleep and we're back here. Maybe looking a little ragged, but we have today projections of Biden winning Wisconsin and Michigan. And that would mean he'd only have to win Arizona and Nevada to get the presidency at 270 electoral college votes. That means he could lose Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. Trump can take those, and Biden would still be president. So the battle is really over Arizona and Nevada right now. I want to look at the numbers in a moment. Elizabeth, Biden spoke today in Delaware. He gave a very typical politician speech. He said we have to unite. We're not red states. We're not blue states. We're the United States. There was a correspondent on the ABC, Australian Broadcasting Corporation, reporting.
Back on.
All right, I'm back on now. Elizabeth, you were talking about Trump's tweets.
Yes, he tweeted that, quote, "We've claimed for electoral vote purposes the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which won't allow legal observers," he says, "the state of Georgia and the state of North Carolina, each one of which has a big Trump lead. Additionally, we hereby claim the state of Michigan if, in fact, there was a large number of secretly dumped ballots, as has been widely reported." That's the latest tweet stolen from Trump, and Twitter has semi-censored those tweets as well, saying that official sources may not have called the race, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the latest from the Trump camp.
Right, and CNN is quoting his campaign manager, Bill Stepien, as saying, if we count all illegal ballots, the president wins. Trump apparently, according to CNN, has filed a bunch of lawsuits for recounts in Wisconsin, Michigan, two states that I said Biden had apparently won today, which allows him just to get Arizona and Nevada and win the presidency. Biden, the CNN is saying that they did file a suit in Michigan to stop the counting. That's key because yesterday I was writing and saying that unless people in Trump's camp actually fall through on his bizarre remarks from the White House last night, or 2 a.m. Wednesday morning, I should say, Eastern time, he said the Supreme Court they're going to ask the Supreme Court to stop the counting. Now, of course, the U.S. Supreme Court cannot at this point get involved in this election. These are local state issues right now. And you could challenge votes. You can ask for recounts. It's got to be done at the state level. But those battles could eventually wind up in a state Supreme Court. There's no way for Trump to go, even with his 6-3 majority now, to go straight to the Supreme Court and say, stop the counting. I mean, here's the guy who saw that he was ahead, and he understood, as everyone does, that the mail-in ballots are going to like 70% or more to the Democratic candidate. So he didn't want those votes to be counted. But mail-in ballots have been going on for decades. I don't even know when they started in the United States. So this is nothing new. What is new is the amount of the mail-in votes because of the pandemic. And it was the Democrats who wisely told their voters to do the mail-in and don't go to the polls, where the Republicans, who've been denying, many of them, including Trump, denying the crisis that we're living in this pandemic, said go to the polls. And not only was that dangerous for their voters to do that, but it turned out many of them probably didn't go because they were afraid. And the mail-in strategy it looks like, is going to give Biden this presidency. Trump could easily have done the same, told his voters to mail in, but he wanted to show that he was bigger than the virus. And he endangered people's lives by doing that. And he probably endangered his own presidency right now.
Absolutely. I think that it's going. This looks like a bit of a worst case scenario in the sense that no matter who ends up coming out on top in the final decision, both sides are going to claim, in my opinion, some level of interference. It's going to overall, I think, diminish the public's confidence in elections, but specifically the counting of ballots in elections. In a general election, that I think that's a really dangerous thing. And it's also unfortunate because thanks to Russiagate, we already had the media saying, "Oh, this is dampened the confidence in American elections," and now that's actually coming to pass. Largely thanks to the confusion from COVID. But it is, I mean, it shouldn't be this close. It's shocking that Biden, given everything, given the fact that COVID, damaged the economy, the George Floyd protest, this should be a walk in the park for Democrats. So I think it says a lot that it's not.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, a victory is a victory, even if it's a close one. Peter Kuznick on our program last night was disappointed or depressed because it wasn't a repudiation of Trump. But putting Biden in the White House is a victory, however way you slice it. I wanted to go back again for a moment to the Biden speech about less than an hour ago in Delaware, and it was, he was truly clearly trying to contrast himself with Trump, who is not a politician in a traditional manner anyway, and this bringing people together, and we're all Americans. And he said the key line he said was, "I'm not here to declare victory." That was a dig at Trump last night, who did declare victory, but I believe we will win. And right now it's looking like we will win, Biden, at least at this stage in this process. But I was mentioning that this ABC Australian correspondent reporting from the U.S. was really debunking this notion. It's just a lie. The United States is viciously divided, and we might see that even manifest itself violently when Biden is declared the winner, maybe as early as today, maybe not. Again, Pennsylvania seems to be irrelevant if Biden can win Arizona and Nevada. I'm going to check those numbers in a minute. But I think that this division is very sharp and got sharper. As we were just saying, a huge victory by Biden would have, and a repudiation of Trump and his supporters would have dampened them down, I guess. But because it's so close, and because the Trump camp is now filing these lawsuits and are going to challenge this and going to drag this out, that's only going to exacerbate tensions. And okay, it's good that Biden is trying to calm tensions, no question about it. But you can't hide the fact that they're there and that he didn't win the kind of decisive victory needed to quiet the Trump side. They are going to fight this thing. It's probably going to get ugly. This probably won't be our last program on this topic, Elizabeth.
I imagine not, and I think that this would have been contested regardless of who had come out ahead. And I think that unfortunately for the American public that just wants a conclusion, I would say, it is going to be dragged out to the last minute. And I wanted to know, in your opinion, Joe, how does this move forward? What will be the procedure that Trump will follow, and what will be the response from the Biden campaign? What can we expect moving forward? I'm sure a lot of our viewers are wondering that.
Well, first of all, if they did indeed file a lawsuit in Michigan to stop the counting, that's not going to go anywhere. I can't imagine any court would accept that kind of thing, because there's no role for government to stop counting. There is a role for recounts. Now, states are different. I can't say off the top of my head what Wisconsin and Michigan's laws are, but some states require a very narrow margin for there to automatically, in some cases, trigger a recount, or in order to enable one side or the other to request a recount. So again, I can't tell you at the moment. I could look this up, whether Michigan and Wisconsin, what their criteria is for allowing a recount. But I think if that's within the reach of the Trump camp, they're going to do that for sure. And then that's key, because without Wisconsin and Michigan, if Trump wins Georgia, if Trump wins North Carolina, if Trump wins Pennsylvania, all three of which he's leading in now, then that recount could be extremely crucial. And while the Biden camp will probably declare victory at that point, Trump won't concede and will continue to fight this. So this could drag out. Again, he's president until January 20th, no matter what happens over these coming days. So he will remain in office. He just won't concede. Biden will declare victory, and it'll have to be fought out in the courts or in the creating a recount and see what a recount would come to. Now, whether the Trump himself or his people accept the recount, what could they do after that? There really isn't much they could do at that point. They can't stop the counting of these mail-in ballots that are record numbers right now. And that Biden could still win Pennsylvania too, because there's still, last night I was watching the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania speaking in a press conference, and she said that there were millions of mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania. And earlier they had been reported there was 1.4 million. So we don't really know how many, but it's a hell of a lot. And Biden has won 78% of those up to now. And big cities like Philadelphia, which is Democratic stronghold, are not done counting as well. They're counting their mail-in ballots. So he has a chance to win Pennsylvania. If he wins Pennsylvania, if he should, and holds on to Wisconsin and Michigan, and which he's been projected to win right now, and he takes Arizona and Nevada, if he loses Pennsylvania, Trump is really he's in it deep, because I don't know if a recount in Wisconsin and Michigan would really help very much. You might call for one in Pennsylvania, but this whole notion that they're finding new votes that in the corner of the room at 4 a.m., and I'm quoting Trump directly last night, is just so ridiculous. He has to know, somebody in one of his lawyers have to have told him that, Mr. President, this is normal. They're always mail-in ballots. What's not normal is the amount of them this time. And guess what? They told their voters to vote mail-in, and you didn't. You tried to, because he tried to discredit this idea of mail-in votes for weeks now. He's been talking about that. So last night really shouldn't come as a surprise that he's saying that they're illegal. I mean, the guy is either ignorant, which I think he is to a great extent, or he's trying to stir up his base to believe that many Trump supporters believe whatever he says. There's no question about that, even if his own advisors don't. Because notice Mike Pence got up there last night, right after Trump, and he essentially said, let's count the votes. I mean, he totally ignored what Trump had said. And that's why I've written that I thought, and they're calling him a dictator, et cetera, but he's always struck me as too incompetent to be a dictator. And also, you need people around you to implement your orders if you're a dictator. And I'm not sure that they're going to do that right now. Now, if indeed they did file a suit in Michigan to stop the counting, well, then they have followed him there, but not anywhere else right now. The lawsuits for recounts, whatnot, that's legitimate. That's to be expected in a close election. Both sides would do that. But this idea of stopping the count is not legitimate, and his advisors had to have told him that. But he's going with it anyway. In fact, he spent it was about an hour before he came out to speak in the White House at 2 a.m. The networks had said he was going to speak around 1 a.m. So there's speculation what happened in that hour. Why didn't he show up for an hour? And Rick Santorum, the former Republican senator of Pennsylvania, who's the token Republican on the CNN panel, they're all Democrats basically except him, he lambasted Trump for his speech, saying he won and going to the Supreme Court. He was distressed by it, as many Republicans are. But Santorum, I think I've lost one train of thought, but Santorum did not see this as a viable pathway for Trump to win the presidency by trying to deny the votes to be counted. It just can't happen.
And I'd also like to bring some attention as well away from the presidential race and just talk about the House Democrats having taken a pretty big hit. What do you make of that? I've seen a number of articles discussing the idea of a change of leadership in the House Democrats.
Well, right now, according to the New York Times, the Democrats have 204 seats, and the Republicans have 188, and you need 218 for the Democrats to retain control. So they're closer than the Republicans right now. But I have to confess, I haven't looked very closely at the House race. In the Senate right now, Democrats have 47, and the Republicans have 48. So that's a real nail biter there as well. Because if the Democrats hold the House, obviously win the Senate, and they get the presidency, they've got the trifecta, and they could, if they want, pretty much do whatever they'd like with their agenda. It's key if there's a 50-50 split in the Senate when this is all over, then the White House is really important because the vice president, of course, breaks ties in the Senate. So if there's a Democratic president, then they would basically have control of the House, of the Senate, even if it's a tie, 50-50. If Trump should win and it's 50-50, then Pence would have the tiebreaker. So the Senate would maintain control of the House. But right now, the Republicans have only a 48-47 lead in the Senate, and the House is ahead 204-188. So Biden, again, he urged patience as Trump still threatens these court actions. I just wanted to say that, look, Biden made the speech that a normal politician would make right now. But in contrast to Trump, he's being praised, as being a statesman for telling just pap, is what I see it as. This is what, CNN was jumping up and down. Dana Bash said, let's talk about Joe Biden. What a great guy he is, It's because Trump's such a chump that, they were able to say this. But it worries me because Biden, I don't think we discussed this at length yesterday, is not such a great guy, a guy who would push for that war that killed hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq, an illegal war that he tried to say was legal, and many other things, the numbers of black men that were put in prison by that prison bill. I mean, he's a typical politician against the most unorthodox political leader the U.S. probably has ever seen, certainly in recent memory. And this is the contrast that Biden is, playing off of right now. But it's not satisfactory for a country that needs serious change that we discussed at length yesterday. Biden is probably going to just restore the status quo ante before Trump ever came as an aberration. He's here, there, and gone, and 4 years of madness and chaos, and back again to sleep. But that doesn't mean that the U.S. military machine doesn't continue to rage around the world, and that people are still not going to have health care in the United States, and that the gap of income will not be as wide as it was before, and that Wall Street still won't have the run of the place. So yes, Joe Biden is a typical politician, and maybe in a time of pandemic that is a good thing in terms of trying to calm people down. But again, he's going to be faced, if he wins, with enormous problems, economic and, of course, the virus. Now, we're hoping to get a couple of guests today. I want to mention people to talk about some of the issues, like Giorgio Cafiero, who's been a guest of ours, to talk about the Middle East policies of both presidential candidates. Pepe Escobar may join us from Asia to talk about China's view of this election, and I'm hoping Mark Sloboda, but the time differences are troubling because it's, I think, 5:30 a.m. right now in Bangkok, where Pepe is, and in the middle, like 3 a.m. maybe in Moscow. So I'm not sure we're going to be on long enough to get some guests, but we're going to hang out here. We're going to hang out here maybe until we get some word on Arizona and Nevada. Kathy Vogan, our executive producer, just sent me that Biden's last words in his speech was, "God bless our troops." What does that have to do with anything right now?
Exactly.
I mean, God bless America is bad enough. They all end with that. But what do you make of that?
Well, and that brings up for me, Biden's cognitive capacity. And I think it's a real shame that basically setting aside Biden's policies as a candidate, I think that his mental capacity is a real issue for his race. And if he does win, I think that's going to be almost unprecedented to have somebody in the White House who seems to be going through such steep mental cognitive decline. And also that brings up the idea that effectively this might be a Kamala Harris win more than a Biden win, just in terms of effective policy. Do you agree with that? What is that? What would that lead us to moving forward?
Well, I was saying that Harris would, maybe 2 weeks into the administration, Harris becomes president effectively.
Right.
But there are more people than Harris. Harris and Biden are front men and women for a special interest, powerful interest, military, intelligence agencies, Wall Street, the key power of defense contractors, although they've done very well under Trump too. The defense contractors, no question about it. He rose defense spending even more. But those key constituencies, the ones that we have been writing and talking about, that we're trying to undermine Trump's campaign by pushing the Russiagate narrative, and then after we're trying to weaken, undermine, even destroy his presidency. And they failed, even though they went after this impeachment, and they didn't get him on the things that he should have been impeached on. But because most presidents could be impeached on a lot of those things: drone strikes, Guantanamo, all of the human rights abuses that the U.S. routinely gets away with, because it's the great beacon on the hill, the great spreader of democracy, and they have fooled lots of people, mostly Americans, about that, but also people around the world. I've met people in the many people in the Middle East who really still love America. I mean, what the hell? I mean, I couldn't believe how many more bombs did they have to drop on your region for you. But there were many, of course, people who understand what the U.S. is. An interesting clip of Ardern, what's Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, in a promo clip on CNN for a show. They have a clip of her being interviewed by that awful, Christiane Amanpour, and who's interviewing Ardern. And Ardern, the clip says, "I don't understand the United States of America." So I think that is quite an interesting comment from a leader of a country, of an allied country, New Zealand. But I think a lot of people around the world don't understand or don't accept what the United States does around the world. And while Trump didn't start a major war, he certainly continued the ones that Obama left him with, and he intensified drone activity in places like Yemen, and he assassinated the top military leader of Iran. Let's not forget what he did in Israel. He moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, something that no president had ever done before, although they may have wanted to. At least they drew a line there. With Israel, he's recognized the annexation plans of Netanyahu, certainly not put any pressure on ending settlements. He's been a disaster on foreign policy too. But Biden, his record is worse, in my view. But we don't know what kind of president he'd be now or what Harris would mean. But to go to your point, she's very ambitious, as we were discussing last night. And being in the White House as vice president with a man in this mental state would allow her lots of perhaps leeway to push her point. But she won't be the only one, obviously. The cabinet, whoever they are, and they look like there's going to be some real warmongering, liberal, humanitarian interventionists, like two women that I knew quite well, Susan Rice and Samantha Power, as they were the American ambassadors at the UN when I was based there. So I knew Rice even better than Power, but I spoke to them, almost every day. So I know both those women, and I think that they're the liberal side of the neocons. They believe in intervention, but they have it under the cover of humanitarian intervention to help end a genocide, to help put down crises, and the responsibility to protect doctrine. This is very strongly held by both those women, Power, and I suspect maybe Rice could be Secretary of State. That's what I'm guessing. I'm not sure what role Power would have. Maybe National Security Advisor. That would not surprise me, because Rice wanted to be Secretary of State, and didn't happen. And Obama chose Kerry, but she got the National Security Council. So now she may have her opportunity to be Secretary of State, and I wouldn't be surprised if Power became National Security Advisor. So together with Harris, those three women would be very powerful around Biden. And you said nobody's ever entered the Oval Office with this kind of mental state. Of course, we don't know about William Henry Harrison got pneumonia during his inauguration speech, and he lasted a month. But Ronald Reagan declined very precipitously
yes,
with his Alzheimer's. Woodrow Wilson, towards the end of his presidency, was almost totally incapacitated. And his wife, it is said, basically ran the White House at that point. So there have been ill presidents before, but going into the White House, yes, winning an election in his clearly, reduced state is shocking, and that does tell you something about Trump, how reviled he is by not only Democrats, but I think he lost a lot of votes, particularly as the experts are saying in the suburbs and women. I don't know how they know this exactly, I guess, through polling, but who believes the polling? That's the other big story, Elizabeth, in this election. The polls once again got it totally wrong. If Biden wins, not as badly as the 2016 election, when they had Clinton win by 95%. But this time there were polls like The Economist magazine had him at 99% chance of winning. They predicted a landslide again. He had 10% national lead. He was leading in all these swing states. And here it's coming down to the second day, maybe, and there might be more. Second day, there'll be court challenges on the recount. I don't think, again, on stopping the counting. That's, and although, when we talked about I think on the Sunday show, the Brooks Brothers riot, when they were recounting votes in Florida, a bunch of guys wearing suits, Brooks Brothers, barged into this recounting thing and just intimidated everyone and got them to stop counting. John Bolton was one of the organizers of that. And so Trump's doing a kind of same thing by wanting, maybe that was a call for something like that to happen, for his people to interrupt the counting. We have to keep our eyes open because it's happened before. In 2000, and you were talking earlier, Elizabeth, about Americans losing their faith in the electoral system. Well, I mean, it started in Florida. I don't know if it's ever recovered from that. That was such a fiasco. And now we've got, another one. This could be if Biden should lose, it would be the third time the loser won the national vote, the what do you call it? The
popular vote, yes.
Popular vote, yeah, popular. So what do you think about that, about the Electoral College? Because I've gone back and forth on this one.
Yeah, I guess I'm basically neutral on it. I mean, I understand that it's the reasoning behind it. I think that, but I also understand the criticism of it. I guess I kind of am just kind of equally split on it. I don't know that I'm on the side that says it should be entirely done away with, but I do understand the critique. But I would like to just add, to go back to something you mentioned earlier about, the state in which Biden is potentially going to win this. I think that I just wanted to comment that there are two major factors that I see helping Biden. Number one is that the Democratic Party, I think, didn't take for granted its victory against Trump this time. Whereas in 2016, I think that the Hillary Clinton campaign, the DNC, the media, everyone watching really took it for granted. And that's why when she flopped, she really flopped, despite winning the popular vote. I think that on the second issue is that basically Biden, I've lost my train of thought too. My apologies. But basically, in addition to the media and the Biden campaign not taking it for granted, you see that basically. I'm sorry, Joe. I've completely lost where I was going with that.
Right. When you said about your split on the Electoral College vote, I've come up with this idea of splitting the vote. Somehow come up with a formula where half of it is determined by the Electoral College, and the other half by the popular vote. And the only reason I say that is because small states with small numbers of electors are going to be totally ignored in electoral campaigns. The presidential candidates will just spend all their time on the East and West Coast. They'll be in California, they'll be in New York, they'll be in Texas, and maybe Florida, the states with large populations. Of course, they do a lot of that now because they have a large number of electoral votes. But it is possible, and we saw it last time. Clinton won New York and California, obviously, but she lost the election. And she won the popular vote because of New York and California, states like that. So you can cobble together a victory with these smaller states by adding up their electoral votes. So that gives weight to the center of the country, what liberals, I think, arrogantly call flyover country, as if those people don't matter underneath your plane going from LA to New York. And they do matter, obviously, but they shouldn't also hold hostage the majority of the population in New York and in California, for example. There's something wrong with that as well. And this is part of this big divide, the one that Biden is saying we don't have, that there is no red and blue. We're just all Americans, blah, blah, blah. But of course, it's a huge divide. And part of this, the Electoral College is at the heart of it So I think that has to be blunted, but not to the point where they're completely ignored. I mean, farmers in Iowa, in a rancher in Wyoming, where there's more heads of cattle than there are people, they still have interests, and I think there would be. Of course, they could pursue that through their congressmen, and they get 2 senators and few congressmen, representatives. But I think the president is supposed to represent all the people. That means that those small states can't get shut out. That's just my 2 cents on that. If Biden lost, I think they and won the popular vote. If he loses and wins the popular vote, I think there's going to be a huge push again to try to end electoral college. If he wins, which it looks like he's about to do, I don't think that's going to be such a thing in the forefront. But I think it'll be very interesting to see if his decline continues.
Right.
And what that means.
I agree. I think that in terms of the Electoral College, I guess I would be ultimately against abolishing it completely, but I do think there's reason to maybe reset the weight of the Electoral College a little bit, to readjust it, to give a slightly less weight to some of these swing states, just because it is unfair to have the popular vote not win an election this many times if Biden loses. And the other point that I lost earlier was that the thing in favor of Biden as well, in terms of comparing with 2016, is that although Biden has a lot of issues, I don't think he has the same level of revulsion in the public mindset that Hillary really did amongst a huge quadrant of the public, not just the Republicans, but I think a lot of independent, green, progressive voters who felt cheated by Bernie, cheated in terms of Bernie, really had a gut level hatred of Hillary Clinton that despite Biden's flaws, I don't think he really inspired that in people. So that's my other observation on that.
Yeah, he's a man too, so there could have been a bit of sexism in hating Hillary, who's a
Right.
and capable woman without any question, even if her policies were pretty bad. And I think Biden, if he starts to continue to decline, I wonder if he's going to be basement Joe or whatever Trump called him. If he stays inside the White House a lot, of course, the pandemic is a good reason to stay inside. But they will have to manage him the way they've been managing him now. His appearances were not all that frequent. He didn't speak very long in most of these rallies. It seems like he did a lot of stuff from the basement. Some of it was taped, I'm sure, so that they could. But there are all these clips that keep emerging where he said at least twice during this campaign that he was running for the Senate. He thought he was running for the Senate, and I think he started calling Trump President
George Bush. He almost called him George Bush. Yeah,
that was recent. Those are I only see them popping up on Twitter, I have to say, by his opponents, because the networks are not playing that. I haven't seen that. They are showing when he seems to be very lucid, like in the debates, and maybe he did get a shot in the ass, like Trump said. I mean, the first time we saw him, that's the first thought I had, was that he's got to be on some kind of. Although he just had a good day, and he was lucky the 2 days he would. But the ultimate thing is not even so much his public appearances, although that's obviously very important. The president's bully puppet role, etc. But his decision-making capabilities. Especially if there's something about military conflict. This is something that is worrying. But again, he might have these. And what's her name? The woman who was at the Pentagon. Flournoy, you know her?
So.
She's slated to be the defense secretary. I mean, you could have 4 women in those key national security and foreign policy posts.
Well,
Yes.
Speaking of another woman, as we just mentioned, Hillary Clinton, do you see a role for her in a Biden White House administration? Of course she does.
I'm open to talking to Biden about a role. I mean, what role? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. What would be open to her potentially, do you think, if anything at all?
Maybe if they stack the court, Supreme Court Justice Hillary Clinton.
Oh my goodness.
That be enough power for her? I think that might satisfy her ego. I mean, she didn't make it to the presidency, at least not yet. I don't ever rule her out. In fact, I'm wrong, and I will confess to everyone here that I predicted Hillary Clinton would ultimately get the Democratic nomination. And now here on day 2 of this election, obviously I was wrong. She didn't get it. I didn't think there was any way they would allow Biden to go forward with this. I think they tried desperately to get first Harris, Buttigieg, Klobuchar. They were trying, the Democratic Centrist Party were desperately trying to get one of them to step up and beat Sanders, and none of them could emerge. He was kicking their butts until South Carolina, when Biden, who got the Claiborne's backing and won this huge African-American vote in South Carolina, that revived his campaign, and then the decision was made. As we know, Obama got on the phone, and told them all get out, except for Elizabeth Warren, who could siphon some Sanders votes. And don't forget, Elizabeth Warren started going viciously after Sanders in the previous debate. You remember that? It was really
absolutely
ugly. And accusing him of being a sexist and all this stuff. And then
it got ugly.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, guess what? Super Tuesday. Biden wins everything. Sanders was destroyed as quickly, very quickly. And he built up this enormous momentum. He won Iowa and New Hampshire, and was like, I don't know what the percentage is, but a huge percentage of candidates who win both of those go on to win the nomination. He was the presumptive nominee. And then he's gone. And that whole wing of the party is once again used to try to get progressive votes without making any commitments to a progressive agenda, to Sanders' agenda. So thank you very much. Now we'll kick you downstairs. It's all over.
And in addition to the moneyed interest that Biden serves, the only logical reason I can see that the Democratic Party would finally settle on him is that, given his mental state, it did serve as a way to shoehorn in somebody like a Kamala Harris. And I think that it would be unfortunate and surreal to potentially have a Harris presidency should Biden decline to the point that he has to basically step down or something, or dies or something like that. Because as a woman, I think it would be a shame for a woman to not get the presidency for the first time via an election process. Harris did not win the nomination in the Democratic Party. She had very little support, especially after Tulsi Gabbard kind of eviscerated her in the debates. So I think that would be both a shame and surreal if that should be our first female president. But I do think the Democratic Party was thinking not only about the interests that Biden obviously has served throughout his entire political career, but also about who they could possibly shoehorn in after, knowing that Biden is in the state that he's in.
Well, Harris would have an opportunity to run, I think, on her own for the 2024 election. I don't think anybody imagines Biden serving 2 terms. I don't think he does either. But so she would have to run then, and that would validate, if she's reelected, the election. I'm not forget LBJ got in, and then he won the 64 election. So that validated his presidency in that sense. And I think the same thing probably could happen to Harris. So even if she doesn't become VP because Biden is incapacitated or dies in office, she probably will be the nominee in 2024. The vice president normally is. One woman who won't be in the cabinet is the one you just mentioned, Tulsi Gabbard. I don't wonder if they'll ever invite her inside the White House.
I don't think so. I think she's going to be a political outsider for the rest of her career. And honestly, I think that she knew that, and that was a decided outcome the moment that she supported Sanders in 2016 when she stepped down due to the rigging. Then that was the moment that she made that decision. Going after Harris in the debates in the way that she did, and rightfully so, just cemented that further.
Stepped down as the chairwoman of the Democratic National Committee,
Vice
right?
chair, yes. Vice chair, yes.
Which, and they were really grooming her because she's an attractive candidate in a lot of ways. She's young and she's in the military, for God's sake, right? And they wanted her to be a typical liberal, and they thought they can ride her and that she would be a future candidate for high office. And she threw all that away because of principle. It's something you don't see very often.
And they've been vicious in response. She's been tarred and feathered completely. She's been, despite currently serving in the military, she's been called a Russian asset. She's been labeled as, trying to undermine democracy, an Assad asset, an Assad toady, on Joe Rogan. It's been vicious and ugly the way that she's been treated. No question.
Joe Rogan called her that?
No. A New York Times reporter was on Joe Rogan and called her an Assange toady, and then didn't know the definition of the phrase toady, infamously. Yeah.
I know who you're talking about. I can't remember her name right now.
Yeah.
I think I blocked it out. this Times report. I don't want to remember her name.
Yeah, it was infamous, but yeah. So I think that unfortunately, I think Gabbard will be shut out in the same way that Sanders has been. I think the most unfortunate outcome in respect to Tulsi Gabbard and Sanders is that they have failed their own base in fucking the Democratic Party once the nomination is over. I think both of them would serve the public much better if they either ran as independents or potentially joined the Green Party or created a third party together. There are a lot of different options, but their refusal to go against the Democratic Party in a final kind of way, I think, is really sad, because I think that both of them do have a level of integrity that they have not shown in a final sort of way. I think that if that it's a real shame, and I think especially when you look at the amount of money that Sanders raised in 2016, the amount of support he had, he really could have made an effective difference. And I think that although both Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie Sanders have a lot of integrity, they really did fail on that final step.
We were talking to Jill Stein yesterday about Sanders having been offered presidential candidacy of the Green Party, and he never even wrote back. We learned from Jill. But I saw a quote from Sanders. I can't remember who he told it, but he didn't want to go to the Green Party or go to a third party, and the reason is he didn't want to wind up like Ralph Nader, that he would be blamed for Trump.
But he was blamed anyway.
Yeah,
we
but
know that.
Third party and split the Democratic vote, then they would have blamed him more than the Russians. They would have. But as I think someone said yesterday, maybe it was Margaret Flowers, I think it was, that even if that happened, in order to make a viable third party with a strong candidate, had an enormous movement behind him, a real movement, not what Trump was talking about last night, now a movement. I never even heard Trump refer to whatever the hell he's leading as a movement. I don't know where they're moving towards. That scares me. But even if that happened and the Democratic vote was split, well, anyway, Trump won without Sanders doing it, right? So we know that now in hindsight. But if Sanders had run on a third party ticket, he certainly would have been crucified for doing that. But that's the first step, as she was saying, Margaret, I think. That the next election, then, you keep building that party as a viable alternative. And she mentioned, I think, the Whigs and the Republican Party, how the Whigs were a major party, and where are they today? Right? They're gone. They don't exist. So maybe someday the Democratic Party won't exist, or even the Republican Party. 70% of Americans want a third party. They don't accept this. This is not going to go away. He could paper it over all he wants, Joe Biden. He could talk about there's no red and blue states. And the American president, I'm going to be your president, all of your presidents. I'm going to send all of your young men and women into battle, whether they're Republican or Democrat. Maybe that's what he's talking about. Red and blue states will contribute to the war machine and to the corporate system and be exploited. In that sense, there is no red and blue states. But I don't know. It's hard to contemplate. Let's look at some of the numbers. It's not been changing here. It looks like, again, Biden has 253 electoral votes, Trump 213. Top Biden advisor says confidence has increased significantly as the days move ahead. Well, yesterday and today, I think. Source close to the White House, this is CNN, says the mood is darkening as Trump is bleeding GOP support. He's bleeding GOP support. In other words, for his tactics of last night. They're not supporting him. They cannot support a president who says, stop the counting because I'm ahead now and I want to win. Right? Yeah, I won the first half of the football match, so we're not going to play the second half because I'm ahead. That's basically what he's saying, right?
Right. Well, and to return for a moment to the third party topic, I am disappointed to see the very dismal results for the Green Party as far as what I've looked at so far. I wish that we could have a stronger Green Party, and stronger other parties, libertarian, whatever type of third party, people would give some sort of support to. I wish that they would be stronger. But hopefully maybe in 2024 there'll be a stronger showing, or maybe there'll be a new party that we can look to as a stronger third party option. Regardless, I do think it's a disappointing result for the Greens.
Well, I'm telling you right now, I'm trying to find a list of the states that the Green Party got on. And my understanding is somehow they didn't get on any of these major swing states. If you've been watching some of the TV coverage when they put up the maps on this wall and they show they could push one of these things and it goes back to 2016 in Michigan.
Right.
And at the bottom, and in Wisconsin, at the bottom, you see Jill Stein, with her 1% or less than 1% of the vote. That is not appearing on the Wisconsin and Michigan maps this year. They did not get on the ballot. I don't know the story why they didn't, but they did not get access to the major swing states. So that argument that the Green Party is damaging the Democrats if Biden should lose is weaker than ever, because they weren't on a lot of these swing states. They were kept off. I don't know how that happened, but they were less of a force this time around than Jill Stein was in 2016, and she was called also, as you say, a Russian asset. Tulsi decided to sue Hillary Clinton. I don't know where that stands. That suit to you?
I believe it got rejected. I'm 90% sure that was thrown out, unfortunately. Yeah.
It's outrageous.
I could be wrong, but I'm sure chat will correct us if we are wrong. And they did remind us that the New York Times reporter that appeared on Joe Rogan and embarrassed herself criticizing Tulsi was Barry Weiss. Thank you, chat, for letting us know.
Let's get some questions from our audience, please.
Audience, we've got quite a few people discussing things in chat. If you want to have some role in this discussion, if you have any questions or comments, please do leave them in the chat box. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, let's.
I'm taking a browse through it right now.
Now, trying to get the numbers up here again. Okay. Now, the Times headline is that it's a nail biter that may extend for days. But the Biden campaign is saying it could be all over today. So Arizona and Nevada, again, with Wisconsin and Michigan in Biden's camp, he has 253 votes to 214. Arizona is 11 electoral votes. He's leading by 51% to 47.6. Biden is 86% of the votes counted. If he holds that gives him 11, which would be 264. And then Nevada has 6 electoral votes. He's leading 49.3% to 48.7% with 86% counted. That's a difference of 8,000 votes to nail biter, really, in Nevada. If he wins those 6, that gives him exactly 270. The 11 from Arizona and the 6 from Nevada gives him 17. He now has 253. That gives him 270 on the nose. That means Trump can win Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia. It won't matter. But Nevada is really, really close. And there's still 14%. The Times reports that state officials in Nevada had previously said that results would not be updated until Thursday morning, but they have since indicated they may release more results today. Remaining votes include mail ballots received on Election Day, those that will arrive over the next week, and provisional ballots. So again, Nevada could stretch out there. And if Biden needs it, we may not get a response today. In Arizona, the Times reports officials in Maricopa County, which includes Phoenix, have said they will update results around 9 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. That's 3 hours from now. So we might find out more about that. Georgia, where Trump leads by about 60,000 votes, 94% has been reported. The Secretary of State said that if a full vote count could not be finished on Wednesday, he hoped that the number of uncounted ballots would be significantly reduced by the end of the day. So we probably won't get an answer from Georgia, and that one's really close. 2,414,854 votes for Trump, 2,357,457 votes for Biden, 80,000. or so votes apart. That could definitely change. North Carolina, similarly, is about a 80,000 vote difference with Trump ahead, and 95% of the votes counted in North Carolina. Mail ballots postmarked by election day are accepted until November 12th. That's how long that could go on. Pennsylvania's got 85% counted. Trump's still holding a lead, a sizable lead, but not as big as it was last night. He has a 51.6% lead over Biden, who has 47.1. That's about a, let's see, 400,000 ballot lead. That's down from what he had yesterday. The Times reports the remaining mail ballots are expected to favor Democrats. Officials have said they expect most votes will be counted by Friday, November 6th. So, Arizona, we're going to get an update at 9. Nevada, they say that we're going to update it by tomorrow morning. They may push that up. So we may be back tomorrow, Elizabeth. We may know tonight who this president is, but then the fun and games with the lawsuits begin.
Absolutely. We've got a couple of questions from chat. One is, if Biden wins, what do you guys think will happen with all the Russiagate nonsense?
I think they'll put it in the drawer, in the desk drawer, and pull it out when they need it. No point flogging that, except when in some kind of a diplomatic move towards Russia or an increase of tension, they could put that in with all the other things, all the other sins that Russia has committed, according to American leaders. So they might just toss that in there. But what do you think, Elizabeth? They won't talk about it. He won. It's only.
I think,
right?
In terms of the presidential results, I think that it will be forgotten and put into the kind of memory hole of the media, just like the WMD story, essentially. But I think that it will be resurrected if Assange is brought to the United States. I think that there will be a huge concerted effort to muddy the waters around the case and try to basically revive the maybe not Russian hacking, but the Russian narrative, in order to kind of confuse people about what's really going on in that case. Especially under a Biden administration. I think that'll be the only way forward to prosecute Assange and not have an uproar in the public mind about it.
Which is why they came out on the eve of the election with the Mueller unredacted section saying that there was no evidence of any connection really between Russia and WikiLeaks that WikiLeaks knew about. It could not be charged, right? That they had no knowledge of that. Because if you read the other parts of the Mueller report, it seemed like they were saying that Assange knew this was the Russians. How would he know? I kept asking that question. How would he know? Now we know that they knew that he didn't know, and that they buried that. So how could they bring up Russiagate again if he comes to Alexandria, Virginia, in a court? How could they do that? Because nobody knew about what that released last night. The night before, right? And the mainstream media, who was not committed to thoroughly reporting a story and all aspects of it, will never bring that up. If they know, even if they know about it, they just won't. I mean,
I agree.
Look,
our next question. Oh, go ahead.
Yes, please. No, please. Next question.
Our next question is, what if Trump issued an executive order to stop the counts and called in federal troops to occupy polling centers to burn mail-in ballots? I think that's a pretty hyperbolic set of theory, abstraction, but I mean,
I think the Democrats would do two things. First, they would call the fire department. And the second thing they would do is go immediately to court and try to stop this executive order as being unconstitutional. And I think even if it got up to his Supreme Court, his 6-3 majority court, I doubt that they would be able to support Trump in forcing the votes from not being counted. You could toss out votes that are spoiled, right? That are not clearly marked, or they have no name on them at all, or have a Chad that's hanging off. We saw that. We learned all of this in Florida. Those can be thrown out. That could be challenged. We don't accept these votes. We think they're invalid. That could go to a court if necessary. But you can't have them stop counting them. You have to count them in order to find out whether there's an invalid vote or not. You got to look at the ballots, right? You got to put it through the scanner or whatever the ways, some myriad ways of counting. Each state seems to have their own ridiculous one, except the one method of counting votes that should be universal across the United States. Paper ballot in a box. They still do that in Germany and many countries. Germany, one of the most high-tech countries in the world. You fill out a paper and you put it in a box, and then they open the box and count them.
It should be in public.
You know, or you could have scanners to count them, but paper ballots, you need a paper, you need a piece of paper. But because that's a whole other issue. We talked a little bit about it with Greg Palast the other day. So yeah, my answer is that I don't think they're going to be fires, but there could be some protests that can get ugly at counting places. So that hasn't happened yet. And there would be a court challenge. You'd never come out with an executive order. I don't think so.
And
You never know with this president. You never know.
And speaking of unrest, I have been glad to see that there hasn't been an outbreak of violence from either side so far. I'm glad to see that. I think that a lot of people were concerned that there would be violent unrest, and I hope that we continue to see a peaceful kind of response by the public. We've got another question, though, that says, as per previous discussion on CN, what percentage of voters grasp that their vote is advisory, with the legislature holding real power of decision? This is a shocking state of affairs. And I'd like to just take one stab at that and just say that I think going back to the Democratic primary, I think it was really enlightening to me and a lot of readers of independent media to see that the Democratic Party considered themselves a private organization that had no responsibility to its voters. They argued they could appoint whoever they wanted, that it was their right of freedom of speech to do so, and that any sort of legal response to that would be a violation of the First Amendment. So I think, I think a lot of people really woke up with that. But Joe, do you have a comment on that in terms of the general election?
What was the question exactly? Sorry.
It said, as per previous discussion on CN, what percentage of voters grasp that their vote is advisory, with the legislature holding real power of decision? This is a shocking state of affairs.
What does that mean, advisory? I'm sorry, I don't follow.
I think that they're referring to the Electoral College there.
Well, the Electoral College votes are determined by the popular vote of the states. So it's not the legislatures that they pick who the electors are, but they don't determine who wins. The voters determine. Some states allow, I think it's only a handful, I used to know this, allow what's called unfaithful electors. That means, let's say Trump wins Georgia, right? Let's say Georgia allows unfaithful electors. Even if Trump won the popular vote in Georgia, those electors could say, nope, I'm going to vote for Joe Biden anyway. I don't care, because I'm going to vote my own conscience. It's unbelievable, but there are a couple of states that allow that. But mostly they have to follow whatever the people said. So they're just, in a way, envoys and representatives of the popular vote of the state. So we talk about the popular vote not counting, less the national vote, but the popular votes in the states is all important. That's how we determine what the Electoral College vote is. So you have to win the popular vote in as many states as possible. The larger ones, the better, because they get more electors, right? So in that sense, all it's doing is protecting smaller states that, again, if you coalesce some small states, you could cobble together a victory. So they're important with the Electoral College. As a popular vote only, without Electoral College, nobody would give a damn about Wyoming or many of the, some of these really less populated states, maybe Arkansas. You don't hear a lot about Arkansas, do you?
That's a very solid red state at this point. It's a state where you do not have to feel bad about a third party vote whatsoever.
Right. Yeah, Arkansas got, just to take a look at that, they have 98% counted, 62.7% for Trump, 34.4% for Biden. It's over 350, more or less, thousand vote difference. Yeah, Biden got creamed there. This is a state that gave us Bill Clinton. So things may have changed. Is the governor a Republican there?
I believe so. I could be wrong. I honestly don't pay that much attention to Arkansas politics because it seems to not matter at all. I know that Tom Cotton is somebody I'm ashamed to have coming from our state, but other than that, we have another question, which is, what corporate entities are involved in the mechanics of the electoral process? This area is often overlooked, yet it is of critical importance. I know that there are the voting machines that are used are proprietary, privately owned software that the public can't look at. And unfortunately, a lot of those machines are very easily hacked. And I don't mean to buy into the Russiagate nonsense at all, but it is a vulnerability that would be prevented, as Joe was saying earlier, by paper ballots.
Well, there's that company Diebold, right? I don't know if they're still probably involved in making these machines. And wasn't there some kind of test or experiment of high school level kids, and they were able to hack into those machines?
Yes.
DEFCON, yeah. At DEFCON conference, these kids were able to hack into these machines. 10-year-olds. So, I mean, what does that tell you right there?
Exactly.
And there's never been any evidence from the last election of this one that Russia hacked into the voting machines. They made that pretty clear last time. They made some efforts to get voting data, but that's publicly available. A lot of that, the registration of voters, publicly available. So that was another just storm in a teacup about we heard a couple of weeks before, just to scare people and to show that Trump again is a Russian agent. I mean, dirty. It's dirty. Politics is dirty, probably anywhere in the world, but America's really takes the cake, I think. And it's got a long, long history of this type of absolute lying, smearing, opposition research, dirty tricks going back. I mean, look at a guy like Karl Rove and the guy before him, who his mentor was, the one who died of cancer and then recanted at the end of his life. Do you know what I'm talking about? He was George Bush's, somebody in the chat's going to tell us. He was George H.W. Bush's dirty tricks guy. And then Karl Rove learned under his wing, and he was one of the worst. I'm just a vicious animal when it comes to these political dirty tricks. Winning is all that counts. There's not a shred of it, of ethics or morality involved in that. It's a joke. They laugh at that. You just win. Any lie, any deception, anything. I mean, right out of Machiavelli, just to win the election. And that guy was dying of cancer, and he recanted everything. He said he was sorry that he'd been such a liar and a miserable person all his life. I got to look him up now. But he taught Rove. Campaign.
A few people are throwing out the name Roy Cohn, and I'm not sure if that's correct.
No.
But I also wanted to read out one last question. Oh, Gordon Liddy or Roger Ailes. But what are your predictions on Assange if Biden wins? And I think that's a really important question. But unfortunately, other than just reviving Russiagate in the confusion, I honestly think that there wouldn't be much difference. I think that the Biden administration would continue to prosecute Assange and continue to fight for his extradition to the United States. Although, I mean, the one tiny sliver of hope is that the Obama administration did decline prosecuting Assange because it did recognize the danger to freedom of the press that would pose. So maybe there's a very slight, tiny amount of hope that that the Biden administration would decline to prosecute. But I think that honestly, the issue of Russiagate, the issue of 2016, I think changes the political repercussions of a Biden prosecution of Assange. I think that the media and the centrist liberal quadrant would not want to prevent an Assange prosecution in the same way they would have prior to 2016. So despite being part of the Obama administration, obviously, I think Biden would not have that same pressure on him to pardon or decline to prosecute Assange.
First of all, the guy's name was Lee Atwater. I don't know if you've heard that name.
I had not heard that name. My apologies.
Yeah, he was a huge figure in politics up until his death in 1991. He advised Reagan and H.W. Bush, and he then became chairman of the Republican National Committee. He was a very powerful and devious figure, and he admitted all that as he was dying on his deathbed. I think there's a documentary about his life that's worth watching. I can't remember the name of that. Now about Assange, it's interesting because we were just saying that they were probably going to put if they win Biden, they're going to put Russiagate in their back pocket, right? But keep it there in case they need it later. So if that's the case, their focus shouldn't be so much, you would think, on Assange anymore, right? They won. They have reversed the evil that they think Assange did in 2016 by enabling Trump to win by simply doing journalism, by exposing corruption by Hillary and her cohorts at the DNC. the abuse of power to fight against bad press by blaming a foreign power to be responsible when it's not disinformation. I keep saying Russia may have hacked it. I know Ray McGovern wouldn't agree with me, and I'm not saying they did. I don't think it matters. Whether it was a hack or a leak, it doesn't matter. What matters was whether the documents were true, and they are. Like I said, there are all these anonymous drop boxes by the corporate media now, so it doesn't matter who gives it to them as long as it's true. Russia could drop something in CNN's box, and CNN may report it, and they'll never know that it was Russiagate to them because it's true. Doesn't matter. So Russiagate being put on the side, you might think, well, let's let up on this guy Assange. You know, it is. They gotta know. They have to know that this is an assault on free press. They have to know that this would set up a challenge if he comes to the U.S. of the Espionage Act as being unconstitutional. Those sections that make it a crime for a journalist to possess and publish classified information, which journalists, of course, do all the time. So while the Holder Justice Department under Obama stopped short, they wanted to get Assange because they were pressured by the Pentagon, by the CIA, by the NSA, by the intelligence, by the blob that, as Obama called it, this national security establishment, that is mostly behind the scenes, wants to get Assange. And I don't think that's going to change, is what my point is right now, whether in the Biden administration. So I don't think they will let that run its course. It's unusual for a government to step in and stop. Prosecution, not a matter about prosecuting him. He's already being prosecuted. He's on the verge of having a decision on extradition. In addition to that, there'll be repeals in Britain that could last a year or two. So it's not going to be an issue that's on the, activists for Assange should put pressure on the Biden administration, but then I'm just going to ignore that. That is not going to be on their list of things to do. Well, the first 100 days of it being in office, let's deal with the Assange prosecution. They don't give a damn. They don't care about him suffering in that jail. And they probably still, people in Democratic establishment hold bitter feelings about him. Still believing this despite what came out on the eve of the election, that Mueller couldn't find a scrap of evidence to get Assange on the electoral issue now, not about, but when you talk about 2010, that is central, and especially then Volt 7, even though he's being prosecuted for that, that really hit deep into the CIA. And the 2010 stuff, we saw they trying to make it about the informants and all that. They still want to get him on that. The establishment, I don't think Biden's going to stand in the way. That's my long-winded answer to that question.
I agree. And I agree that also that Vault 7 does change the landscape as well. I think that will add pressure to Biden to keep, to let it run its course at minimum, as you say.
I wonder if
check.
Excuse me. I wonder if you keep Gina Haspel there. So then we'd have our string of hawkish women around him. And then, of course, he could peddle that as being progressive and liberal because they're women. But, so was Margaret Thatcher. I mean, listen, that would be that Flournoy, if I'm not pronouncing it now, I should know her. I'll look that up. Rice, Power, Harris, and maybe Haspel. How's that for a lineup of 5 women who are pretty aggressive on foreign policy?
Yeah, I don't think that's a win for women by any means. I don't think most women in the Middle East care about the gender of the people bombing them and ordering the bombing of them.
Exactly.
It's a sad state. We have one commenter saying the DNC leaks were downloaded and given to Craig Murray, and I just want to correct you and say that was, even if the DNC leaks were a leak rather than a hack, Craig Murray didn't have anything to do with that. It would have been something to do with the Podesta emails that were given to WikiLeaks in September. So just to comment on that. Another, I'm trying to look for another question that I had here. Yeah, so it says, Joe, did you ever hear the story that Sanders was threatened before the DNC convention in 2016? There are allegations that he had a contusion on his cheek on the day of the convention. Did you hear about that story? Do you have any thoughts about it?
No, I've not heard that story. And maybe he nicked himself shaving. I don't know.
Who knows? Yeah.
By the way, the woman I'm thinking of is Michelle Flournoy. It's Flournoy. Flournoy, Flournoy, and she was the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy in the Obama administration, and she's in line, many people say, to be the defense secretary. So we left out Hillary. That would be the sixth. What job would she get? I'm guessing they're gonna expand the court, which they legally can do, because this Constitution does not fix the number of members of the court. So they could expand that so they can get back a Democratic majority. The supposedly neutral, non-political, purely legal court it's so obvious that it's a politicized body. I mean, it's so obvious. It's become, each time someone's nominated, it becomes more and more obvious. So the Democrats, it's within their right to expand that court. And then if they were, let's say they had, 4 seats, they have to have an odd number, right? So it's 9. And they say they make it 13. You think Hillary wouldn't be interested?
I would, well, I mean, I think she would be interested in anything that gave her a position of power. So absolutely she would be. Where would that leave us? Not only if Hillary was on the court, but if it is packed, where does that leave us? I mean, what effect would that have on the decisions, do you think, other than the obvious conclusion that they're politicized?
Well, it's a 6-3 majority now, right, for the conservatives.
Mm-hmm.
So if you add 4 seats to make it 13, and the Democrats nominate 4 and get them through, especially if they hold both houses, right? At the Senate, they got to hold the Senate. That gives them 7-6. That's the calculation. 7-6 majority. So they could do that, and Ms. Clinton might not mind moving back to Washington and wearing that robe. I mean, look, I have a lot of problems with the Supreme Court. I mean, the makeup, the way it is portrayed, the fact, first of all, that they have lifetime appointments. This is abominable. They should have a maximum of a number of years or a maximum retirement age. You can't have these people hanging on forever. They have too long power. Number 2, the way they're portrayed, like these, they're on the top of Mount Olympus, and the clouds part, and they render their judgment down from the mountaintop. They have so much power, at least they're portrayed that way, rather than being final arbiters of decisions. And a third thing, I have read and heard from lawyers, both for the government and against, who argue before the court, that you never say the slightest thing that might be rude. You never interrupt them. If they start speaking and you're talking and they interrupt you, shut up. You have to kiss their asses at all times during arguments before the Supreme Court. Because if you were to anger, if you were to anger one of them, you're going to lose the case. So I'm thinking, really? Is that what their decisions are going to be based on? Whether they were personally offended, not the legal merits of the case? I mean, this is just awful. And I've heard that from a couple of lawyers. I've read them, not didn't tell me personally. Read, and anybody go look that up, how to argue before the Supreme Court. Don't tick them off, which is why during the Assange hearing, I was, even they were stuttering, milady, milady, they were also sometimes quite sharp with Vanessa Barrecha. And I think that that generally doesn't happen in an American courtroom, and I've been in numerous American courtrooms, but the Supreme Court especially. You don't tick them off. You don't tick off a judge. They'll rule against you because they don't like you. I mean, what kind of a system is this? Seriously. So Hillary would be great. Don't tick off Hillary. I think she would love that job because it's powerful. She's a major figure. She will have a lot of attention again. And it's probably the next best thing to being president. She's been Secretary of State already, been the wife of a president. What's left for her? She can't do Secretary of State again because that is a grueling job. You really need to be a younger person. Although I have to say, Warren Christopher was Secretary of State for Clinton, and he was really old and decrepit when he got the job. But there's a lot of flying obviously involved. It's grueling. So, and she's done that already, been there, done that. So that's my prediction now, although I predicted she'd get the nomination, so I was wrong there. But she will be one of the new Supreme Court justices when they pack it with 4 more members.
And I can say as well, regardless of what the outcome is in terms of the presidency, I think that what we can say and what we do have control over individually is that none of our voices are going to be stopped. We're all going to continue to be critical and skeptical of power, whether it's under Trump or Biden. And I think those are some of the constants that we can all, not just as independent journalists, but also just as individual people, whether it's sharing good sources of information on social media, whether it's participating in some sort of demonstration in the public square. I think that people have been woken up to the corruption in politics in general, especially since 2016. So I think I think the silver lining is that those movements should continue. However, I think you'll see a lot of if Biden wins, you'll definitely see the resistance crowd calm down. I think they'll, so to speak, they will go back to brunch and go back to sleep. The media will go back to sleep, but independent media will not. And so I think that's something that I expect should Biden win.
Well, that's the impression I got when I saw Biden speak today in Delaware, and the reaction by these commentators on CNN. Oh, Joe, let's talk about Joe Biden. What a statesman. Go back to sleep. That's what I thought. Go back to sleep. Things are back to normal. Everything's okay. And as Caitlin Johnson and so many of her columns, many others have said, that normal is not okay the normal before. As if, America's going to be all great again. Now, I want to, any sane person does not want to see Trump in office. But the problem is a new set of problems will come, a really serious set of new problems. You'll get rid of him, but do you have any more questions coming in there right now, Elizabeth?
Not at the moment. I think Kathy was suggesting we run a Greg Palast extract to talk about voter suppression and the difference between voter suppression and voter fraud.
That's very good. And I'm trying to organize a guest to come in after that. So play that. Roll the tape, Kathy. Thank you. Why do you conclude that Trump is going to steal this?
Right. Well, because Trump has already stolen 2020, but we can steal it back. The book, How Trump Stole 2020, that's a warning, not a prediction. Okay. So there's ways to steal it back. And I discuss, today, if you go to gregpalast.com or to Leonardo DiCaprio's Instagram story page, you'll see a 13-minute film called The Purged. And this is about how Trump stole the election by his cronies removing millions of voters from the voter rolls on phony, bogus grounds. Now, according to the Elections Assistance Commission, the federal government and the Brennan Center, they both have the same number. 16.7 million people have been removed from the voter rolls in the past 2 years. A lot of people are going to show up to vote, and they'll be told, sorry, Charlie, you're not here. Here's a provisional ballot, which you can, wipe your tuchus with. Now 16.7 million people won't show up and be told you can't vote. Some re-registered, some are dead, some have moved, but about half are wrong. And so I just issued a report for the ACLU of Georgia. We went through the list that the Republican Secretary of State just to purge the voter rolls there of about 1/3 voters. And we determined that exactly, we're not guessing, we went through every single name, obviously major computers help, 198,351 voters were illegally removed from the voter rolls. And if you see that film at my website, The Purged, one of the things you'll see at the opening is a 92-year-old woman, just as she's being thrown out of a polling station in Atlanta. This 92-year-old woman had been voting at the same polling station named Christine Jordan for 50 years. Or she was trying to vote for a 50th year. They removed her.
All eyes are focused on the state's race for governor. Abrams could become the country's first female African-American governor.
Are going to elect Brian Kemp.
And has this ever happened to you before?
Never.
How long you been voting?
All my life, ever since I was old enough. But I've been voting right here ever since 1968.
We're not going to let them steal this election. I mean, we're going to stand up for what's right here, but they ain't going to steal it from these people. Look at all these Americans here.
He's upholding the voters' law of America. Either your signature matches or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, you don't get to vote. You have to come back in and redo the thing.
And I think if they throw rocks, we should kill them.
That's what Trump said.
See?
And it's horrible. And I say that because the West End, she's been in this community back when they were doing sit-ins. She held civil rights meetings in her home. And today to come out and not be able to vote and no one can give you an explanation, like, it's extremely emotional and it bothers me. It bothers me to my core. Like, there's actually no record of her whatsoever voting in any election whatsoever, and it's ridiculous. I'm sorry.
And that day, all over Georgia, other voters found their names just vanished from the voter rolls. Who took away their vote?
I'm Brian Kemp. I'm so conservative. Got a big truck, just in case I need to round up criminal illegals and take them home myself.
Brian Kemp.
Yep, I just said that.
Used his special power as Secretary of State of Georgia to simply cancel Christine Jordan's voter registration. Who would benefit from removing Mrs. Jordan from the voter rolls?
In just 2 days, the people of Georgia are going to elect Brian Kemp.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. We're so glad that you have Georgia on your mind.
But Kemp had a problem. In 2014, an investigative reporter with Rolling Stone named Greg Palast got his hands on a secret, highly confidential computer file from inside the office of the man in charge of the voter rolls, Secretary of State Brian Kemp. The list targeted an astounding 580,000 voters. For 20 years, reporter Greg Palast has been investigating attacks on the right to vote.
Look, here's a number that I uncovered. 340,134 voters. They were removed illegally from the voter rolls of Georgia before the 2018 midterm election. That's a lot of voters. They were removed by a Republican state official who's the guy who's running for governor.
Palast flew to Atlanta to investigate.
When I'm at the Ebenezer Baptist Church, I happen to run into the leader of the Democrats in the state legislature. Her name is Stacey Abrams.
The Republican officials, they have begun a process of removing voters.
So I showed her the list, and she was like, what the heck is this? She's never seen this.
And I'm deeply concerned that our Secretary of State, that someone who works for the people of Georgia, has decided to spend his time and energy trying to purge voters as opposed to what a Secretary of State should be committed to, which is enfranchising voters to the best of his ability.
If Kemp could get away with removing hundreds of thousands of voters, and if other states picked up his purge trick, it could elect a president.
Breaking news, this is a big political story. Thousands of Wisconsin voters will be removed from the state's voter registry following the ruling of an Ozaukee County judge.
And I don't know why it is that we have people who are so adamant about making sure that we take people off the registration roll.
In 2016, Donald Trump was elected president by just 77,000 votes, about the size of a Beyoncé concert. But over 2 million voters showed up at the polls and were told their registrations had been eliminated, vanished. Was Trump elected by the voters, or was he elected, and will he be re-elected, by eliminating voters? The voters eliminated are known as the Purged.
come to this point where there's no love at all for a whole group of people who are not going to understand when they go to vote why they're getting hassled.
Wisconsin's Republican legislature had voted to eliminate 129,000 voters, 6 times Trump's teeny 2016 victory margin. The state said they moved. They left the state palace, questioned one of the voters Republican officials said had left Milwaukee. This is Sequana Taylor.
Found out last week that I was on the purge list.
Okay, so what are your positions here?
Yep, so Milwaukee County Supervisor, District 2, and School Board Director, District 3.
It comes down to a simple question. Did these voters actually move? Palace took the purge list to the nation's top experts on address verification. This is John Lenzer.
Well, we've worked for everybody from Home Depot to Amazon. I've worked for 300 to 400 different companies. They use advanced address hygiene to correct their databases and make sure they have the correct address of their customers so that their mailings are more accurate. We use 240 different data feeds from all kinds of companies, subscriptions to magazines, your mortgage address, pretty much anything you subscribe to. And they maintain a file of a person's correct address. I would think that whether it be the state of Wisconsin or the state of Georgia or other states that have used these techniques would be well advised to use advanced address hygiene. They'd save a lot of money and have a more accurate result.
They know where I'm at. They know where to find me. It's not hard.
But those directing the purge don't even look at the state's records.
I never left the state. I never left the county. So all they had to do was look at my DMV record and they would see that I live in the same county.
And not just any voters get purged. The hit list targeted 1 in 7 of the state's Black, Hispanic, and Asian American voters.
You could call this Purgeville.
And the purge list was also filled with young voters.
Hello, my name is Pio. I'm 21 years of age. I currently go to Madison College. Because I moved 2 houses down from where I used to live, I was removed from the voter rolls, and that's just not fair.
False stories, all made up, lies.
And voter fraud is all too common.
So do you believe that there's fraud in Michigan?
Well, we've been very aggressive in closing vulnerabilities and loopholes.
Well, I see the aggression.
It was a shock when Trump won Michigan, and by a mere 10,700 votes. But the state had purged at least 60,000 voters based on a secret list. Palace went to investigate, surprising the Secretary of State of Michigan with the secret purge list.
499,092 Michiganders are on this suspect list. Mm-hmm. Is this to eliminate fraud or is this to eliminate voters?
It's to clean our voter lists and ensure that there's no vulnerability for fraud.
Statistical experts who have looked at this list say it's heavily overweighted against minorities because it's just basically a list of common names.
I'm not familiar
Michael
with that.
Brown, Jose Garcia.
Mm-hmm.
Could you imagine that would be a problem in terms of...
I did not know Brown was identified with one race.
You know, Brown was a common name in America, and
it's a
black
very
name.
common name.
It's a very common black name in America, yes.
I've known a lot of white Browns.
I am urging my supporters to go into the polls and watch very carefully, because that's what has to happen. I am urging them to do it. They're called poll watchers, a very safe, very nice thing. But if I see tens of thousands of ballots being manipulated, I can't go along with that.
Yes, Jesus love me. Yes, Jesus love me. Yes, Jesus love me.
This is Christine Jordan's home, the one they said she'd left.
I grew up in Atlanta. So, you know, when I grew up around constantly hearing about the civil rights movement and everything that people have done for us to get this power, and to know that it was taken away from my grandmother, next year it could be taken away from me. You never know. And I was just really hurt. And I really couldn't believe it. I could not believe it.
It was time to talk to Kemp.
Doing all right? Hey, man, Mike. Good to see you.
Mr. Kemp, are you removing black voters from the voter rolls just so you can win this election?
Sir, please do not touch him.
I'm not touching.
Hey, good to see you,
Kemp,
Senator.
why are you purging voters from the voter rolls?
Marty,
Okay.
Have some decency.
Sir, why aren't you answering my questions? Sir, why do we have to sue you to get the names of voters who've been removed?
So it's like you were disappeared, like you were not even a person anymore.
That's what I said. I was dead and gone, buried. But I'm still on top of the earth by the help of the master.
Since I was about 5, I've been going with her to vote. Every year, like religiously. And she always made sure I got my voter sticker. You gotta get your sticker. And so that's another reason why I was hurt, because I know that I've been there with her.
She showed her family album, including several photos of her having dinner with Martin Luther King's family.
Daddy King was my great uncle.
When, Kathy? Well, we're back live now at CN Live Election Headquarters. We're joined by Giorgio Cafiero. Giorgio is the CEO of Gulf State Analytics. Giorgio's been a guest before on CN Live, and we're here to talk to him about the foreign policy or the Middle East policy of both candidates. Giorgio, welcome back to CN Live.
Good to be with you guys. Thank you.
So, as you see now, it looks like Biden is probably going to win. Is that your assessment?
It seems that this is going to be an extremely close race in terms of the electoral outcome. But yeah, it seems that the most likely outcome will be a Biden win, with him making it to 270.
And a challenge on the courts and recounts and whatnot. So they probably stay messy. So let's get to the topic of Middle East policy. Can you tell us first about Trump's policy, what we've seen over the last 4 years, what you expect going forward, and then what you know of Joe Biden's Middle East policy and how different it is from Trump's?
So many different issues in the Middle East. I think on some of these issues, we can expect a change in U.S. foreign policy with Biden at the helm. However, when it comes to some other issues, I think we might see more of the same. When it comes to Iran, I think we could possibly see some changes that would be significant. Obviously, Trump made his decision to unilaterally pull the U.S. out of the Iranian nuclear deal with JCPOA back in 2018. This has been an important part of his record in the Middle East. Biden, of course, was a veteran of the JCPOA. He took part in the process that led to that nuclear accords passage back when he was the vice president. I assume he's going to be bringing many other veterans of the JCPOA into his administration. It's not so easy or simple as Biden just bringing the U.S. back to the nuclear accord and bringing the U.S. and Iran back to some understanding. In practice, that process would be very, very difficult. But I think Biden would try to salvage the JCPOA. That's one area where we could expect a big difference between him and Trump. Also, when it comes to Yemen, Biden has actually talked about this conflict on the campaign trail quite a bit. And I don't want to come across as naive. Clearly, campaign rhetoric and what presidents do once they're in power, not always the same thing. You got a gap between the two. But if Biden is sincere when he says that he wants to end U.S. support for the Saudi-led war in Yemen, that would have huge ramifications. That would completely change the situation in Yemen if Washington ceased to support Riyadh in that conflict. That could have a huge impact on the U.S.-Saudi partnership at large. Now, when we're talking about Syria, I do not think that Biden would necessarily change U.S. foreign policy too much. Trump has been applying maximum pressure to Syria. There was the Caesar Act passed not too long ago that basically strangles Syria financially. I think that when you look at Biden's past positions and you look at the people around Biden, like Blinken, and you hear what they're saying about Syria, I don't think we could expect too much of a change in terms of America's approach to that conflict. I don't think with either Trump or Biden in the White House, any sort of reconciliation between the U.S. and the Syrian government is in the cards. One final conflict in the region to bring up is Libya. This is not a conflict that consumed too much attention from the candidates on the campaign trail. The conflict in Libya is not really at the center of most American voters' minds, but it is a major conflict that is having a huge impact on Africa, the Mediterranean region, the Arab world at large. And I think possibly Biden would try to make the U.S. a more assertive player in Yemen, possibly giving more support to the UN-recognized government in Tripoli. This could create some greater alignment between Biden and Turkey, while also adding some friction to relations between the U.S. and the Arab states that have been backing Haftar in Libya, chiefly UAE, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia.
Joe, you're muted.
Yeah, let me ask you about Saudi Arabia. Look, with the murder of that journalist or whatever he was, who worked for the Washington Post, really upset a lot of the Congress. I think Democrats, particularly, or at least Trump, didn't sort of brushed it off, right? Didn't hurt his relationship with bin Salman. It has not hurt, certainly, the arms deals that have been concluded, et cetera. In other words, the relationship has survived that under Trump. Would that work into the calculation for Biden in terms of his relationship with the Saudis in terms of Yemen and just in general?
The Khashoggi affair is a very sensitive issue in U.S.-Saudi relations. You're absolutely right to point out that Trump and Pompeo and others in the administration constantly bent over backwards to give the Saudi crown prince the benefit of the doubt, despite the fact that the CIA concluded that he was responsible for the murder. I don't think Biden would have such a personalized relationship with Mohammed bin Salman or MBS. And I don't think Biden would go to pains to protect the Saudi crown prince from actions taken by American lawmakers. Among most Democrats, there's a general view, this is among left-wing Democrats as well as more centrist neoliberal Democrats, a view that Trump failed to establish red lines with Mohammed bin Salman, and that the Trump administration failed to hold the Saudi leadership accountable on a number of issues, including but not limited to the Khashoggi affair. So I think Biden will be, making decisions that reflect kind of this Democratic Party position on Saudi Arabia. I think there could be some symbolic actions. Maybe some arms sales will be delayed or frozen. Probably Biden is not going to be making a state visit to Saudi Arabia anytime soon. I think one thing that's going to distinguish him from Trump is that the kingdom will not be the first foreign country he makes his first official presidential trip to, which we all remember is what Trump did back in May 2017. So there's going to be a lot of gestures, a lot of symbolic actions that Biden would probably take to demonstrate that he is approaching Saudi Arabia differently. But would Biden really cut off these arms sales entirely? I'm a little skeptical about that. We'll just say seeing is believing, but it's very easy to say this on a campaign trail. What kind of decisions Biden and Harris will make about the Yemen war once they're in power I hope to be back on your show in a couple of months when we have a little bit of a better idea of what's actually going to happen in practice.
Well, you're always welcome back. But of course, it was the Obama-Biden administration that gave the green light to Saudi Arabia to begin this assault on Yemen. I believe it happened just during sensitive moments of the negotiations over the Iranian nuclear deal, where the Saudis and the Israelis were screaming bloody murder against it. And I've always felt that Obama threw this as a distraction or a sop to the Saudis. You can go into Yemen, just leave us alone on the Iranian deal. So since Biden was involved, presumably in that decision to allow the Yemen war to go forward, and on top of that, the U.S. has given logistical support to the Saudis. How important is that logistical support? If the U.S. if a Biden administration were to withdraw that support for Saudi Arabia's prosecution of the war in Yemen, what would that do to the war? Would that end it? Would it just curtail it? What would that mean?
It would be a big game changer. The Saudis would not be able to continue as they have been doing since March 2015. Some people say, oh, the Saudis will just go to Russia or China or some other country for that kind of support. But it can't happen so easily or smoothly. As this war is going on, if Washington cut off its support, the Saudis would have to make some pretty difficult decisions. I think that would put a lot of pressure on Riyadh to come to the negotiating table in good faith and push more aggressively for a diplomatic settlement and sort of abandon its objective of achieving an all-out military victory against the Houthis. Doubtless, though, a continuation of the Trump presidency would certainly mean a continuation of these kinds of policies toward Yemen that we've seen for the past 4 years, where Trump is just so focused on arms sales. He's basically viewing the war in Yemen as an opportunity for U.S. firms to create some good-paying jobs in the heartland. So, yeah, I think there definitely is a difference between the two candidates here. And you are right to point out that Biden was the vice president when the Saudi-led war in Yemen began. He has tried to distance himself from the Obama administration on the Yemen file. But again, I don't want to be overly optimistic here. And we always do need to keep in mind that campaign rhetoric is often different from what presidents actually do once they are in power. But we also need to keep in mind that the mood and public opinion has changed in Washington and across the U.S. with respect to the Yemen war. When the coalition went into Yemen in March 2015, there was kind of a bipartisan consensus almost in support of what the Obama administration was doing. The narrative was very simple. Iran is now posing a threat to the GCC countries from Yemen, and that if the Houthis gain more power, this will only embolden Iran, and thus the U.S. needs to stand by its GCC partners. Today, over 5 years later, that's not really the popular narrative in Washington. The war is no longer supported by Democrats, and even we see a lot of Republicans opposing U.S. support for the war in Yemen. So the mood has definitely changed, and Biden will be dealing with these kinds of dynamics that are definitely different from those dynamics that were in play back in 2015.
So essentially, Biden can end the war in Yemen if he wanted to. Let's move on to Syria for a moment. Is there any chance that, under Obama again and with Hillary Clinton at the Department of State, there was some strong U.S. backing to overthrow Assad to the point of arming and backing some of the most distasteful elements in the region, jihadists. For example, al-Nusra, for example, Al-Qaeda in Syria, embraced by the Obama administration, the same group that brought down the Twin Towers. Is there any chance that in the Biden administration, and we were speculating before with Elizabeth about who his cabinet might be, for example, Secretary of State Susan Rice, maybe, National Security Advisor Samantha Power, just speculation. Is there any chance that they would revive an attempt, or to go back again and try to overthrow and get Assad out, or is it too late now? Is it just come down to Idlib province and the battle there? Has Syria, with Russian help and Iranian help and Hezbollah help, irreversibly won this war? Or can Biden administration revive that policy, regime change?
I don't think that the Biden administration would try to take steps to topple the Assad government. Could be wrong, but that's just the feeling I have. But as you did point out, Idlib is where our attention should be. I think we could possibly see the Biden administration trying to beef up support for anti-Assad forces in Idlib to try to keep this province under their control. And again, that would certainly be another issue where you could see the Biden administration bringing the U.S. into closer alignment with Turkey and Turkey's agendas in northern Syria, at least that part of northern Syria. As we move east in the country, you might see Turkey and the Biden administration having more problems when it relates to the areas where the YPG has had a presence. But at least in Idlib, I think, as you imply, number of the people who would probably be in Biden's administration would have an outlook toward that part of the conflict that sits well with Ankara.
Sits well with Ankara, so they want not allow this war to come to an end by a final defeat of the jihadists that were assembled in Idlib from Aleppo, for example. As the Syrians advanced, they were busing the jihadists into Idlib, and this is where the final stand is. Let me go to Idlib.
I think, they would try to prevent the Syrian government from having a military victory in Idlib. I think that's something we can definitely expect.
Prolonging the suffering in the war, basically. Would they continue, the Biden administration continue to occupy the oil fields in eastern Syria, which Trump has openly told us is why they're there, for the oil?
I haven't really seen anything from Biden or anyone on his campaign to suggest that there would be major changes in U.S. policy vis-a-vis Syria from what we've had over the past 4 years. Again, when it comes to Syria, I think this is a conflict where we could probably expect more continuity in U.S. foreign policy.
Yeah. So let's talk about it. I want to ask you about Israel for a minute. As Trump did the unthinkable, which is to move the capital from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. No president had done that. He's backing just about everything the Netanyahu extreme right-wing government wants. He recognize any annexations, etc. Joe Biden, I saw a clip the other day I'd never seen before. A young Joe Biden telling someone, I think an interviewer, saying that you don't have to be Jewish to be a Zionist. I'm a Zionist. He said that. I know you've probably seen that. So what changes would we see in a Biden administration towards Israel? He would not return the embassy, for example, to Tel Aviv, would he?
No. Arguably, he would not have made that move that Trump made had Biden been in the Oval Office at the time. But no, now that move was made, I don't think Biden would return the U.S. embassy to Tel Aviv. Again, I think that when it comes to U.S. Israel relations, there may not be that much change also on this when it comes to this relationship too. I mean, as you correctly point out, for so many decades, Biden has been extremely close to Israel. And I think the Israeli government's perspective, and probably the perspective of many Israeli citizens, is that no matter who's going to win this election, Trump or Biden, there's going to be a U.S. president in power next year whom Netanyahu will be able to work with very, very well. So again, probably when it comes to the U.S.-Israel relationship, we can also expect a lot of continuity.
Do you think he would prefer Biden over Obama? Because Obama and Netanyahu had their difficulties, didn't they?
They definitely did. I think there'd be a preference toward Trump, but again, Israeli establishment would be totally capable of working with either Trump or Biden. It was going to be a win-win as far as Israel is concerned.
Which Netanyahu said when Trump foolishly put that conference call on with Netanyahu on television. He made it public, and he said, you don't think that Sleepy Joe would have come up with this great deal with the recognitions by, and I want to ask you about that, by the UAE, Bahrain, etc. of Israel. And Netanyahu said, "We will work, Mr. President, with whoever is the leader in the United States." So he's selling him. I'm not giving you that, Joe. I'm not intervening in the electoral thing because to us it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We'll work with Biden just as well as we work with you. But if Biden had a little bit of a spine, like Obama did occasionally against Netanyahu, whereas it looks like Trump was putty in Netanyahu's hands.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was wise of Netanyahu to sort of hedge a little bit if he were to give a response to Trump that would go against Biden. It could create some issues if he's going to have to start working with Biden in January. So I think he avoided something there. Is probably good for his interests.
But tell us about great achievement. I'm sorry.
No, please.
This great achievement, Trump, it doesn't look like it won him the election, but he was trying to make a great campaign point that he was able to engineer these peace deals with Israel. Now, anyone who understands that conflict with the Palestinians knows that this is completely throwing the Palestinians under the bus by these Arab countries who had already kind of dismissed the Palestinian cause for decades or years anyway. And now it's become formal. I mean, we used to be kind of secret agreements or secret relationships between the Saudis, for example, and Israel, or the Qataris. And Qatar, by the way, does not want to do this, apparently. Biden will clearly embrace this. Sudan was the latest. He will, in your view, will he embrace this and continue to try to extend these normalizations between Israel and their Arab neighbors?
Absolutely. So these efforts to try to normalize relations between Israel and more Arab states goes back to 1948. This has been something the United States has been pursuing for Jimmy Carter, 1979, and with Bill Clinton in 1994. These were considered huge achievements in U.S. diplomacy in the Middle East. This is going to continue into the post-Trump era. The United Arab Emirates has been playing a big role in pushing other Arab and Muslim countries toward normalized relations with Israel. There is every reason to expect this to continue into the post-Trump period, and there's absolutely every reason to expect Biden administration to continue welcoming this trend. I think it just sort of reflects new realities in the Middle East's geopolitical order. For the UAE, its top interests are countering Turkey and Iran, as well as Qatar and the Muslim Brotherhood. Defending the Palestinian cause is just simply not a priority for Abu Dhabi. And I would argue it hasn't been a priority for Abu Dhabi for decades. It's, the fact that the UAE has not seen Israel as a threat really ever. Let's keep in mind, UAE became an independent Arab country in 1971. So the last Arab-Israeli war that was fought took place 2 years after the UAE gained her independence. And unlike other Gulf states, the UAE was not involved at all in that war. So the UAE has never had a hostile relationship with Israel. It's never been a confrontational player in the Arab-Israeli conflict. And going back to the 1990s, the 2000s, there has been cooperation between the Emiratis and the Israelis in a whole host of sectors, from diplomacy, technology, investment, so on and so forth. People who've been looking at Gulf Arab-Israeli relations have been aware that this was the worst kept secret in the Middle East, that that UAE and Israel have had a tacit partnership for many, many years. With respect to the other Gulf states, obviously the UAE certainly had a big role in terms of putting pressure on Bahrain to also normalize its relationship with Israel, and we know that happened in September. When it comes to the other Gulf states, I am not so sure that there's going to be any normalization with Israel coming anytime soon. Kuwait is very pro-Palestinian in its foreign policy. Widespread opposition to normalization among Kuwaiti government officials, as well as people throughout the society. The Sultanate of Oman has a very good relationship with Iran, and Oman always plays kind of a balancing role in the region, which I think could be thrown off if there's an accord between Oman and Israel. So I would not expect the Sultanate to take that step anytime soon. For Saudi Arabia, I think the kingdom will move in the direction of normalization, but not all at once. I think because of certain religious factors and political factors, the Saudis will move a little slower. There's going to sort of be gradual steps toward normalization, but never, or at least probably not a certain watershed moment in which they announce full-fledged relations. And Qatar is sort of similar to Kuwait in terms of having a pro-Palestinian foreign policy. Soft power is really important to Qatar's influence in the region. Qatar tries to defend pan-Arab causes. They push certain themes that rest on narratives about dignity and human rights, so on and so forth. And Qatar has a partnership with Hamas that has grown pretty deep. So there would be a lot for Doha to walk away from if Qatar were to normalize relations with Israel. So I think probably in the Gulf, we're going to see the UAE and Bahrain be the only two Arab states that have fully normalized ties with Israel. Though as a final point, I'll say I think the next Arab or Muslim countries to normalize relations with Israel are going to be those in North Africa and the Sahel, Morocco, Mali, Mauritania, so on and so forth. I think those are going to be the countries where a Biden administration might have some success in working with Abu Dhabi to sort of integrate Israel into the wider Arab and Islamic world's diplomatic space.
You said there were religious and political factors that would hold back Saudi Arabia. What about popular pressure? Is there any sentiment for the Palestinians amongst the populations of all these countries that would cause some problems for Israel?
Yeah, in Saudi Arabia, the majority of the population is against normalizing relations with Israel. There certainly is a risk that if Saudi Arabia would announce a so-called peace treaty, a peace deal with Israel, that could spark a clerical revolt at a time in which oil prices are low, the COVID-19 pandemic remains a very serious crisis, and the war in Yemen is going on unresolved. This issue with Israel would possibly add another layer of instability within Saudi Arabia. And I think that's one more reason why the Saudis would probably be very careful and avoid taking this step at least anytime soon.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, I just have a couple of quick questions. The first is, can a lot of viewers, and not particularly viewers and readers of Consortium News, but people out there who discuss Trump's foreign policy will often say that he's been an anti-war president. Can you briefly debunk that for us and for our viewers?
Well, yes. I mean, again, there's always the rhetoric from politicians, then there's the actions that we see. Trump has talked about ending the endless wars, but he also, as president, boosted military spending quite a bit. He continued a lot of U.S. military involvement in various conflicts around the world. Maybe his predecessors started those wars, but Trump certainly continued many of them. And I would argue that as a consequence of the anti-Iranian campaign of maximum pressure, the Trump administration definitely did a lot to increase the risks of the U.S. and Iran falling into a military confrontation, even if that would be a scenario that Trump never wanted. This dangerous brinkmanship certainly left, and while I shouldn't speak in the past tense, and Trump is still the president after all, I would say this brinkmanship continues to leave U.S. at risk of getting bogged down in a new war in the Middle East that involves Iran.
And my last question for you would be whether a Biden administration's policy in the Middle East would overall, in your opinion, increase tensions with Russia, decrease them, or would they basically stay the same, in your opinion?
It's a very good question. It's complicated. I think there are some things that Biden would do that could bode well for the U.S. Russia relationship. I think if Biden were to try to cool the temperatures with Iran and ease the pressure, I want to be very clear. I think Biden might ease the pressure on Iran, not end it, but at least ease it. And I think Moscow would welcome that, because if there were to be a military confrontation between the U.S. and Iran in the Persian Gulf, that would pose a huge threat to Russia's interests. So again, on Iran-related stuff, I think Russians would welcome some changes. But again, as we were talking earlier in this discussion about Idlib and how we can expect Biden to maintain a very rigid anti-Assad stance, certainly potential for developments in Syria to fuel more tension between Russia and the United States. Also, when it comes to Libya, if the U.S. is going to align more closely with Turkey and the Government of National Accord in Tripoli, which has been fighting the Russian-backed General Khalifa Haftar, we could see this conflict in North Africa also contribute to greater friction between Washington and Moscow.
Excellent, Giorgio. I want to thank you very much for giving us some time this afternoon.
Thank you both.
Middle East policy of Biden and Trump. And we will have you back on again very soon. All the best.
Sounds so good. My best to both of you. Thank you so much.
So now we're going to welcome in from New Zealand, Kim.com, the internet entrepreneur who came on our show some time ago to talk about Julian Assange. And we welcome Kim to the show to talk about the U.S. election. It looks like Joe Biden may win. Kim, what do you make of this?
Yes, I think you are correct. I think he will get Nevada and then it's done, 270.
By the way, we apologize that Kim's video is not being fed to us. We only have audio, so we're going to the radio portion of the show again. Thank you, Kim, for coming on. Yeah, he needs just Nevada and Arizona. So what would, in your view, what would a Biden presidency mean on a whole range of issues? I presume you would be happy to see the back of Donald Trump. Is that correct? For one thing?
I don't like Biden or Trump. I think none of them is going to make any difference to the path that is set in stone for U.S. empire. You know, I think quantitative easing times are over. The U.S. dollar is in decline. They can't pump the markets anymore with printed money. So I think after this election, we're going to see a collapse of the U.S. market and financial systems. It doesn't matter who wins this election.
What are the ramifications of that?
A global depression. The U.S. is 25% of the global economy, and they're going to take everyone down with them.
And that's related to the pandemic, no doubt, right?
The pandemic is a trigger that has accelerated things, but this problem has been around for many years. You see more and more economists warning about the drastic decline of markets and value in the US dollar. I don't know if you are aware, but in 2020 alone, the Federal Reserve created 22% of all US dollars now in existence. So within 1 year, they have basically printed 22% more new US dollars.
And how has that not devalued the dollar or caused inflation in the US? How did they figure that out?
It has. It already has. And, you're not having positive interest anymore anywhere. And any asset that is linked to the US dollar will be affected by the decline. You can't just endlessly print money and expect the world to, just consume your new dollars that you are printing every year. And there's just been, under Trump, there's been absolutely no restraint. So we're now at levels where foreign countries are trying to get rid of their U.S. Treasury bonds or U.S. government bonds. They don't want to have any of these toxic assets that they know are just going to depreciate.
That will just accelerate the decline in the U.S., especially if China starts unloading those securities, right?
Yeah, China owns, I think, 7 or 8% of U.S. debt. If they would put that in the market, that would be dramatic.
Yeah, bye-bye. On the pandemic, now you're in a country that handled it as well as anybody has. And Ardern, your prime minister, was rewarded just recently with re-election. I don't think anybody handled it as worse as Trump did. Maybe Bolsonaro in Brazil and perhaps Modi in India, but Trump, the cake there. How would Biden, in your view, handle this? Would he have the same issue of balancing opening an economy and locking down sections of it so that the virus stops spreading?
Well, what nobody seems to understand is that Trump had no choice. And Biden will have no choice either. Because if you shut down the US, if you do the type of lockdowns that we have done in New Zealand, the economy would implode. You had 30 million new unemployed when the pandemic started and lockdowns were initiated. And it almost broke the back of the government because they were not able to fund that level of payroll that they had to put out to keep people going, that they could pay their bills and their rents. There's very limited ability to maneuver for the US. It's just not possible to fund extensive lockdowns in the US. I know that Trump is aware of the real situation of the economy in the United States, and that is why he was so eager to keep everything open, because the economy was the only thing he had going for him to get reelected. You have so many deaths in the United States because of the pandemic for two reasons. Number one, Trump wanted to get reelected and he had to keep the economy open for that. Number two, the government didn't have the money to actually afford extensive lockdowns and a proper pandemic response because they're so high in debt. They would have had to print not just 22% of new US dollars in 1 year, but 50% of new US dollars within 1 year. And that is just unsustainable. It would have completely collapsed the US economy and accelerated the depression that I expect to happen in the next 1 to 2 years.
So lives had to be sacrificed for Trump's
reelection. Yes. There was really no choice.
Elizabeth,
do you see any real substantive differences in a potential Biden administration over a Trump admin? And if so, what are they? What issues would that cover, really?
Well, what I do like about Trump, and just let me be clear, I don't like him very much because he was the reason that Megaupload was destroyed, and I'm having to fight my case. But when he talked about climate change in the debate, that was an issue where I agree. When he says we have to roll out fossil fuels, there's no way around it, and we have to go back and rejoin the Paris Accord and do more for our environment. And this is the biggest issue of our generation, to keep the world working for future generations. So that is probably going to be a positive, that the Democrats are going to move the world back into climate change consents and working together to combat that.
In addition, I've read your Twitter thread that you have from October 18th, where you were predicting that Biden would win. Can you run our listeners through that and what your reasoning was behind that prediction?
Yeah, I've analyzed the 2016 election extensively because I wanted to understand the phenomenon Trump and how he had won. And there are a couple of things that most people are not really aware of, how the combination of factors that led to his 2016 victory. And they are actually quite sophisticated things. So there was the Cambridge Analytica support with very targeted ads to over 80 million Facebook users, where users were basically psychologically profiled to create ads specific to them. A very new, unique way in trying to get people to vote or even get out and vote. But what they also have done, and that is a story that came out not too long ago from Channel 4, they have suppressed the black vote at the same time. So they identified black voters and bombarded them with messaging about Hillary Clinton, calling them predators and all kinds of things like that to deter them from voting. Then another thing was gerrymandering, and I'm referring to several documentaries in that thread that I recommend everybody watches to understand how 2016 happened. Gerrymandering is another very important way to manipulate the vote by redrafting the borders of certain councils, certain areas in a state, to ensure that you manipulate the vote by drawing the lines in a way that you win certain districts, right? So all of these things combined have allowed Trump a narrow win in 2016. Now, because these things became known and the Democrats became aware of this, it wasn't as easy as it was in 2016 this time around. So these tools were no longer available to Trump in the way they were in 2016. And then on top of that, you have to, of course, add the negative impact of the pandemic and the handling of the pandemic. When you have 230,000 dead, you have friends, family members, people that are frustrated about this, that are blaming someone. And in this case, it would be Trump. So that is also going to affect the electorate and the number of votes. And then there are a number of other issues that I've pointed out. For example, that all the big tech companies this time around are with Joe Biden. As you can see, Trump's Twitter and social media is heavily under attack by the big tech companies. The New York Post account was shut down when there was negative material about Hunter Biden coming out. You can see that these big tech giants are playing a more important role this election than they did last time. And one thing that also no one seems to get is that this blow from 2016 that was so totally unexpected to the fake news media, to can you still hear me?
Yes, absolutely. You're still on.
Yeah, sorry. So I think I lost you there for a second. The fake news media, the big tech companies, they have taken this election now far more serious, and you see how cautious they are, how they are really running their narrative up and down the road all the time, and not the liberal media is not showing anything negative about Biden, basically protecting their candidate and running shotgun and making sure that their audience isn't even aware of any kind of questions about his character or his corrupt dealings. And of course, Biden is completely corrupt. And of course, the funds that Hunter received from Burisma, from China, from Russia, they will have somehow ended up to benefit Joe Biden as well. There's no doubt in my mind. The only reason he got these deals was because those companies and countries wanted to buy influence with Joe Biden. So when you take all of these factors combined, it was just a complete no-brainer to me that Trump cannot achieve the same success that he had in 2016. But I knew it would be a close race. I didn't believe the polls at all. I thought the polls were just as wrong as they were in 2016. But I knew that he's not going to get across the line this time.
Two very quick questions, one of which may be a little bit meatier than the other. But the first one being, do you see a role for Hillary Clinton in a Biden administration? We've discussed that a little bit earlier today. But secondarily, and more importantly, can you comment on any difference between the Biden administration and the Trump administration in the prosecution and the current attempted extradition of Assange to the United States? We've talked about that earlier, but I'd like to get your thoughts on it.
Well, it's not going to improve the situation of Assange because the Democrats are still blaming him for Hillary's loss. You know, they scream Russia, 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 but at the end of the day, when they are together in a room talking to each other, they know that it was WikiLeaks that did a lot of damage to them. So I think they will have a sense of revenge about that. So I think under Biden, things are not going to improve for Julian Assange. Hillary Clinton is going to have a big comeback, no question about it. I mean, these two big crime families, the Biden and Clinton families, they're going to work together again, like in the past. So, you know, but like I said, it really doesn't make much of a difference who of the two candidates is going to win, because the US is far beyond the point of return to turn their economy around and to have a real economy and not one that is based on fake printed money. It's a Ponzi scheme that is going to explode. And I've been saying that for the last 2 years quite a bit. And you see the increase in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general. Also, the price of gold has been booming. This is because more and more people are waking up to this reality that it's not going to continue as it was in the last, decade.
Joe.
What about Kim? What about your case? Will there be any change with the Biden administration? Will it get worse? For what?
No, I mean, he's going to deliver to his donors. That's why this whole case even started. You know, he's close friends with Chris Dodd, who became the chief lobbyist of the MPAA representing Hollywood. They kind of came together and allied to threaten Obama a little bit, saying, you know, the Hollywood studios are not going to fund your re-election campaign or our re-election campaign if we don't do something significant against piracy. And they tried with the Stop Online Piracy Act. I don't know if you remember that. Biden was pushing that. It was a very draconian act that would have changed our internet forever. And only because of massive protests of millions of people actually protesting against it, it failed. And then the alternative was to shut down Megaupload so that Hollywood had something in exchange for all these donations, and of course Dodd's relationship with Biden. And in order to achieve this feat, Biden has appointed his personal lawyer as an attorney, a U.S. attorney in the DOJ in the Eastern District of Virginia. And the funny thing about that is, after he was Biden's lawyer, he was a lobbyist for the Business Software Association, so fighting for more copyright protections. And he has made large donations to Democrats while he was in that position. And at that time, it was the law that someone who is appointed as a U.S. attorney either has to have a White House waiver if he was lobbying, or he has to have a 2-year period of no lobbying before he can get appointed. And in the case of Neil McBride, who was appointed as a U.S. attorney, they just ignored that completely. He went basically from active lobbyist who was giving thousands of dollars to Democrats to being a U.S. attorney. And then that same U.S. attorney brought the case against Megaupload. So Biden put his own guy illegitimately into the DOJ to bring the case against Megaupload. And that's all very well documented. Like all these things can easily be verified. And then what we did right after our case, we downloaded the White House visitor logs, which Obama made transparent. So you could see every single person that has been to the White House and had meetings with the president or the vice president. So we looked at all the meetings of the vice president, and there were two meetings that were quite interesting. And this shows the political nature of this case. A week before Biden had all the major Hollywood executives at a meeting in the White House, together with an extradition expert from Hong Kong, where I was living at the time. A week prior to that meeting, he had the same U.S. attorney give a briefing to his chief of staff about the developments in my case. Like, when are we going ahead? When are we charging him? When are we going to do the raid and all these things? So these two meetings show very clearly the connection that Biden had to this whole case, and that he is really the driving force behind that. We've also released a white paper about this. My lawyers have put that together. That's on my website. So anyone who's interested in seeing how the pay-for-play schemes work that Biden is using, they should have a look at that. It's actually quite interesting. And to this day, which is also very important, my case is a civil case. It has never been a criminal case. Neither before the raid of Megaupload and the charges against me has this ever happened. And since then, and that is also very important, it hasn't happened again. No other tech company has ever been charged with the same allegations that the DOJ is making against me. So it shows you that this is a novel test case. And just this week, the Supreme Court on election day has ruled that I can be extradited, but has also given me a pathway to challenge more things in court that the lower courts gotten wrong. We had a judicial review to see, if the government conduct was acceptable, or if this is a political case or not. So the Supreme Court has given me a lifeline, basically saying, okay, you can make these arguments now, and there will be a separate hearing about this, meaning that my case will probably run another 5 years through the New Zealand courts before there's any conclusion, and then it will have been 15 years and probably $50 million in legal fees.
Wow. That was the New Zealand Supreme Court. I think you told me that you thought the U.S. also went after you because of your association with Assange. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a convenient factor. I've always been a donor to WikiLeaks, and at the time when they considered bringing charges against me, that would have been on the list of items to deal with at the same time. I was definitely known by the Pentagon task force that was looking into every single person that is a key figure supporting WikiLeaks. I was definitely on the top of that list because I was one of the largest donors. I've given hundreds of thousands of dollars to WikiLeaks.
Well, Kim, let me ask you one question about foreign policy. Would Biden's be demonstrably different than Trump's? Will he be more aggressive? We saw him support that invasion of Iraq in a very important way back in 2003. He's much more aggressive towards Russia, maybe not towards China as Trump is. How do you see a change in U.S. foreign policy under a Biden administration?
All U.S. allies will be relieved when Trump is gone. I think nobody liked him. The NATO countries, as well as the close U.S. allies. There was a climate in New Zealand of really not liking him, and whatever polls you look at internationally, Trump is just extremely unpopular. It's surprising though, because unlike Democratic presidents in the past, he has probably killed far less people than any Democratic president in the last few decades. So he definitely made a mistake in Syria with the fake chemical attack to send Tomahawk missiles there, and and strike them for that. That wasn't a real chemical attack, and he's made some other blunders, but nothing where millions of people died. So that's something you have to give him credit for. But when you listen to generals that have left the Trump administration talk about his attitude towards war, I mean, it's one thing what he says in public, but they all seem to suggest that he would love to go to a war. That he has even mentioned that he wouldn't hesitate to use nuclear weapons and things like that. So I think he's a loose cannon, and it's probably better for the world that he isn't president, but it's also not much better to have Biden. But I know that U.S. allies are, of course, going to be relieved. Having Biden, he will be much easier to deal with. By the way, none of that matters anyway, because the whole world is going to be affected by a major U.S. depression, which is guaranteed to come.
When do you see that happening? This year?
Like I said, in the next year or two. There's not much time.
Right. Well, Kim, thanks a lot for joining us. Unless you have something else to add, we'll let you go.
Well, I have one question.
Yeah.
One quick, very general question is, how would you advise Americans, people living in the United States, to go forward? How would you advise them to demonstrate in the streets? What can they do, especially those who feel completely disenfranchised and are realizing that the electoral process is really not where they're going to get the change that they want?
Yeah. Chaos is guaranteed. I think matters are going to get much worse. This election is contested, will be contested by both sides in the courts. There will be a back and forth of allegations and things like that. And the U.S. is already at a breaking point when it comes to anger. You can really feel that this powder can explode anytime. And what was the second part of your question? What can Americans do?
Yeah,
okay,
what can people do?
Here's the most important lesson from this election and the previous election. You cannot trust your media anymore. The right-wing media, Fox, Breitbart, etc., are all just always saying what Trump does is great, no criticism or very limited. And the same on the other side, the left-wing media. So you're not really getting facts. You are getting bias. You're being spoon-fed bias on a daily basis. And the best way to prevent being in that trap is watching left and right media. But ideally, what you really need to do is demand that this biased reporting has to end, that it should be about the news and about the facts and not about trying to manipulate my mind who to vote for, who the better candidate is. And now that tech companies are playing that same game for political favor, because let's face it, what they really want, what Facebook wants, Google, Twitter, and all of them, is that there are no antitrust proceedings against their monopolies. And this is what they are. They are monopolies. They control so much of our daily lives. The biggest risk that they are all facing is that they are being broken up. And they have an understanding with the Democrats, or they had under Obama, that as long as they share the user data with the spy agencies and create backdoors for the government and things like this, they will not be touched. As long as the big tech giants support a Democratic candidate, they will have no antitrust issues. And that is a huge corruption against the US people, because when a company gets so big, like Google or Amazon, and they control our daily lives and control the marketplace, and normal competition cannot occur, then that's really not for the benefit of the public. So these two things are the most important. You need to sort out your media, and you need to sort out your tech giants. And then you may have, a new basis on which you can make an educated decision about who to elect based on facts and knowledge, and you're not ignorant to the facts. The tribal movement of the media and tech industry has to stop. That is completely undemocratic and causing all of these issues that Americans have by being so divided.
Thank you.
That's
we appreciate your time.
Analysis. Kim, excuse me, that's exactly what has gone down here, how they put even more pressure on tech giants to regulate interference in the election, etc. Censorship, essentially, you have to call it. Not censorship, because as a private company, they can do it. It's not censorship. Government can't do it, so they set up them as proxies to do it for the government, in my view, to do this censorship. It's a really, really important point you made. And the state of the American media is as bad as it can get. And I thank you for those comments.
Sure, no problem. You guys have a good rest of the show. It was nice talking to you.
Very good, Kim. All the best.
All right, bye-bye.
So that was Kim Dotcom, who is internet entrepreneur, is being pursued by the Justice Department for supposedly copyright violations. There was a criminal charge. They raided his house in New Zealand in the middle of the night with commandos coming. I mean, just absolutely ridiculous. And he was talking a little bit about the latest in that case, but he's a keen observer of the world and the United States in particular, politics and the economy. And I think that, Elizabeth, that was quite fascinating, that last bit there about the tech companies having this deal with the government and the Democrats about sharing their data with the NSA, and then in exchange, they won't be broken up. And that's really what they care about, money. He's absolutely right. That's the bottom line of Facebook and Twitter and all that. I don't think they really care about the politics very much. It's about staying in business and making even more money. Amazon too.
Absolutely agree. I think that it was interesting seeing the Hunter Biden issue, not only because it was so obviously politically biased, but also because my instinct was that they were censoring that particular story specifically to avoid being dragged in front of Congress and accused of, interference again in the election. Instead, they were dragged in front of it for censoring the story. But yeah, I completely agree with what Kim had to say. I thought that was great analysis, and I thank him for his time again. I think that I hope that he's wrong about this coming second Great Depression. But I do think that it could potentially be a very dark time ahead as well. And I just hope that independent media stays strong in critically appraising the situation as we move forward. Because as Kim said, the media has just been an absolute stranglehold on truthful information. And maybe it's always been that way and we've just become more aware of it since the internet age, but it really seems to have increased in my mind. In the 4 years since 2016, I think it has gotten worse. They've doubled down.
No doubt about it. And what you're saying about hoping that there isn't this depression, it occurred to me the other day that I think a lot of people feel that we're going to get out of this somehow, that the pandemic will end, the economy will recover, and life will be good again. And it just hit me the other day, Elizabeth, that maybe that doesn't happen, or not for a very, very long time. Maybe there is no vaccine. There's never been a vaccine for AIDS, for example. That's a long time. That started back in the Reagan administration. And maybe the economy won't recover. And it's just like this. It's getting deeper and deeper. Maybe it'll just get worse. But I'm sorry that I felt that way, because you have to go with some kind of hope in order to go forward. But it just dropped one in an instant. I thought maybe this is a false hope. Maybe there'll never be an end to this pandemic. Maybe people will just keep dying, and the economy crapping out.
And I also think it's essential to understand that even if the stock market comes back, as Trump likes to, tout over and over and over again, that doesn't mean that things have improved for people in the public overall. And I do think that things are going to get worse before they get better. And I think that the fact that billionaires have increased their wealth enormously since COVID hit is sickening. The fact that as you're getting, not only are you having people lose their jobs, but obviously, and I don't mean to, beat a dead horse, but small businesses dying out, people, the employees of those businesses being thrown out of work, and no help for the people that are losing their jobs and their businesses. Meanwhile, these billionaires are increasing their wealth. It is sickening to watch. I don't see Biden really helping that situation much, or Nancy Pelosi helping that situation very much. And so unfortunately, I do think it's a pretty depressing picture. But and I think if anything, this election proves, and not only this election, but the process by which we got Biden as a candidate should show people that presidential elections are not where they should look for real change. You know, you need to be out there advocating for real change yourself in person in your community, as Jill Stein talked about so eloquently last night.
You know, I don't know if I agreed with Kim, and I'm sorry we went on to another topic, and I didn't bring him back to this about Trump not having a choice, but to sacrifice human lives for the economy, because and that the U.S. didn't have the money to pay workers who have to stay at home because of lockouts or lose their jobs, because what he ignored is the huge bailout that went to billionaires, to Wall Street, in these three so-called stimulus packages. Well, American workers got a paltry $1,200 once. So if that money, instead of going to the top 1% who are again pillaging the Treasury for their own ends, using this crisis to take advantage of it, like Naomi Klein has showed us in Disaster Capitalism, that's another example. Instead of looting the Treasury, that money could have gone to workers. Even the amount of, New Zealand was able to do it, Australia, countries who've been able, Britain to some extent, have been able to keep paying workers who have lost their jobs or need to stay home and can't do their jobs, at least temporarily, during this pandemic. And America has a much larger workforce, obviously, but they have so much money they've wasted on those billionaires. I don't know why that couldn't have been applied to the maintenance of workers so that the economy could be closed down when necessary, or sections of it, to stop a spread of an outbreak somewhere. So I don't know on that. What about you, Elizabeth?
And I think it also shows how out of touch the Democrats are with the public. I mean, and we already know that they're out of touch, but the extent of it is really shown by the bailouts as well, because you'd think, just if for no other reason, out of a sense of self-interest, that there would be some effort to help Main Street to a far greater degree than what has been done, out of a sense of self-preservation on the part of the Democrats and to some extent the Republicans, in terms of wanting to prevent outright riots and so severe social unrest. I mean, the fact that the Democrats don't seem to see that is really disturbing. And I think that, we could afford to help people just by starting to potentially tax some of these major, huge tech companies, whether you're talking about social media, but specifically also companies like Amazon, that have been just vampires on not only the fact, not only in the sense that they don't pay enough tax, but also the way in which they've destroyed small businesses, or not only in the U.S. but around the world.
Well, as far as the Democrats not being concerned about uprisings and whatnot, I think that they can co-opt these.
Yes.
Get control by taking a knee and wearing an African scarf and saying, we buy Black Lives Matter and putting it everywhere and painting it on the street, that's going to somehow, they'll be able to control this. And I think that they're fooling themselves, especially if the crash that Kim.com was just forecasting comes about. It'll become unbelievable. And there's also, as you say, protecting themselves, not only from the uprising, but from the virus itself. They're letting it run rampant here. Let me talk now, the Republicans, we'll see how Biden does if he gets in. But to let this thing run rampant, they're not immune to it. He got the damn thing. And he got a mild version of it. They gave him a lot of treatments. We don't know what the hell happened, but he was out of that hospital in a few days. And he was on the balcony of the White House ripping his mask off and saluting a helicopter. He's better now. Okay. But they can get it. This is that story by Edgar Allan Poe about the red mask, where this prince brings all of his friends into the tower because they want to escape this plague that was going on. And of course, it eventually gets in to the castle and they all get it. So they can't protect themselves. This is an equal opportunity killer, this virus. So you got to contain it. And I think America has enough money to keep the workers solvent while you contain it. I don't agree with Kim. I'm sorry I didn't challenge him on that, because he went on for a while and then went on to another question. But anyway, that's my point of view. I don't think it's inevitable that they had to I was kind of shocked by that they had to sacrifice lives in order to keep the economy going. It's a mess, that's for sure. I mean, not an easy problem for anybody in charge to handle. I don't envy anybody being in government right now having to deal with this.
Definitely not. And I mean, I was personally, just as an added comment, I was disappointed to see, even the most progressive politicians like AOC, stand up against and speak against the huge corporate bailouts that were in the stimulus packages, but to still vote for them. Just that type of attitude was it was saddening to watch. We do have an update from our producer, Kathy Bogan, who says that CNN says election officials in Nevada will announce at noon tomorrow. So that's a small update. Joe, do we have any other update on the current numbers that we can look for?
No, CNN and New York Times both, they have 253 for Biden and 2014 for Trump. That's the New York Times. But this curious article from the Australian in Australia, a Murdoch paper, pretty dreadful one, I have to say. They have a headline now that Biden just 6 votes away from the White House, that after winning Michigan, his total is 264. I think it's a mistake. I think they just got it wrong. Because after Michigan, he got to 253, not 264. But in any case, he's getting close. And Trump's getting desperate. And we're going to see these legal challenges. And state officials in Nevada reverted to their original plan of updating results Thursday at noon. That's suggesting they may release results on Wednesday. So I don't think we're going to have a result today. I don't think we're going to have a winner today.
Another question. How long do you think this will drag on substantially? When do you think we'll get a firmer idea of an outcome?
Getting easier to predict this. So I'll go on the limb this time. I was wrong about Hillary Clinton. I think we're going to get Biden declared a winner tomorrow. And then the Trump team is going to go into action with lawsuits to have recounts. They're not going to be able to stop the counting, but they're going to be able to do recounts after the counting is over. So that's going to take time. So again, Trump remains president. He's going to challenge it. His supporters, Fox, whatnot, are going to say he's not the legitimate President Biden. Democratic media and the Democrats are going to say he is. Until we know the results of those lawsuits and recounts, we won't know for sure. So this could drag on, in a sense, for months, with Biden claiming victory and Trump challenging the recounts. And after that, I doubt that it would be overturned. I don't know of many instances in history where, on a scale like that, there have been local elections that have been...
Get out your notebook. More.
Looks like the program ended, so... Okay. Whoops. Look at the camera.
I'm seeing that I've got Joe. I mean, maybe there's a delay, but I've got Joe still talking.
Well, looks like our program ended by itself. We're back in now. All right.
Essentially.
I finished my thought. Some of you may have seen the end credits playing. That was just a mistake. Yeah, it was a mistake, which we all make. So I think I was saying that, that I only in some local elections that I know of that, like mayor or governor, even, that an election is overturned because of the recount. It's never happened in presidential history. But we've just published an article, republished from The Conversation, about a history of contested elections. Samuel Tilden and Rutherford B. Hayes in 1888, I believe it was. That's a very famous one because it was so close. They went to the House. They couldn't resolve it until the Democrats agreed to take the occupation forces of the U.S. federal troops out of the South that were imposing the Reconstruction era reforms, and then they'd get the presidency. So that was a really dirty exchange there. So the Democrat Rutherford B. Hayes won, but they had to withdraw the troops from the South. And it was not to the benefit of the newly freed African Americans down there, and it led really to the increase of Jim Crow and the Ku Klux Klan and all that era, and the lost cause and all that, because the troops were removed. They were sent back again, of course, by Eisenhower, 54, which caused an enormous ruckus, as if the Civil War had never ended, as if it was still the same period when he wanted to impose desegregation order in a school, Brown versus Board of Education. So anyway, we might go to our website and read that article about that. Unless you have something to say, Liz, I think I'd like to take a musical break because we've been going straight.
There's one more update.
Another update.
Well, while we get the update, I'd just like to make the comment that I thought it was also interesting that not only have we seen record turnout in this election, but we also saw in some of the results, it looked like Trump had actually doubled his support among the African American community from about 6% to 12%. And also amongst the Latino community, it looked like there was a pretty substantial increase there, although obviously it still remains a very small percentage. And I've seen a lot of commentary on that so far. Again, I think that it speaks more to a rejection of the Democratic Party, and especially I can understand why the nomination of somebody like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would turn off those communities specifically. So I think it's more commentary on that than it is a growing support for Trump, in my opinion. But I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that, Joe, before we bring in another update.
No, I have nothing to add there, but the projections from CNN, Kathy just sent us this, that Trump won Mississippi and North Dakota and Biden won Colorado, although their figures have not been updated in terms of electoral college. But let's take a look at that. So Biden wins Colorado. Is that what it said? Yeah. Colorado is 9 electoral votes. And Trump, it says, won North Dakota and Mississippi. So North Dakota is 3 electoral votes and Mississippi is 6 electoral votes. Is this new? Because it doesn't add to their totals. I don't know if this is a new update or if this has already been decided. North Dakota, South and Mississippi.
The maps I had seen already gave those to Trump, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think they already gave them to Trump. Okay. The 4 Democratic Congresswomen of the squad have all won re-election. That's Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar. And some of the other 2, the ones in Michigan, right? The other 2 women, you know who they are, right? Elizabeth, are you there?
Yeah, Rashid Tlaib, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and I believe I'm missing one.
Yeah.
Apologies.
4th one that never gets as much attention, so we don't remember what it is. Do you know about this 100-day program that Sanders has come up with to try to hold Biden's feet to the fire?
No, I hadn't, but that sounds like a failed initiative from the start. I think the idea that you can push Biden to the left once he's won the White House is ridiculous, not only based on what we've seen from the Democratic Party, but just Joe Biden's entire political history speak to him completely being a representative of the money party. There's no other way. I don't think you're ever going to hold him to account while he's in the White House or while the Democratic Party is in the White House.
Totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. It's absolutely, apparently, as you just said, that they would complain about this bailout and then vote for it. They apparently in this document, Ocasio, AOC also blasted Biden, but supported him. So they wedded to the party, as Jill was saying yesterday. There's no way to move him left. You said it as well as could be said, Elizabeth. There's no way to move Biden to the left. They're faking that to get those votes. Somehow the Greens were left off of, they did not get ballot access in the swing states. I don't know what the backstory to that is. I'll try to find out some more about that. So they've engineered this. They got the media, as Kim so brilliantly pointed out, to bury that Hunter Biden story, to censor other things through by proxy through the social media giants. Biden is no way going to be moved. He's for fracking. He's for invasions. He's for all the ugliest things. And they threw their lot in him as if he's going to change.
The only surprise there for me, I shouldn't say surprise. Surprise is the wrong word. But the real travesty of that isn't so much even the fact that Biden won't be moved left, as we already know, but the fact that Bernie Sanders would falsely try to convince his supporters that it's possible. I think that's even more of an insult than the fact that they won't go left in the first place. It's almost like the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats, as far as many progressives view it, which is that, you know, the Democrats and the Republicans are both against the interests of the public largely, but the Republicans are much more open about it. The Democrats are a little bit more covertly so. And I think that in the same, you can use the same analogy for Biden and Bernie. Biden's more openly against the American public in terms of Medicare for all and all of these other platforms that the progressives really want. Whereas Bernie is kind of giving this false impression to the public that there's even a chance the Democratic Party will represent their interests. And that I find really insulting, rather than, you know, at least, you know, maybe admitting that the Democratic Party's in some way failed them. And again, as I mentioned earlier, if Bernie and Tulsi had gone on to either create a third party, run as independents, whatever, there could have been a chance of actually seeing some of their initiatives and policy positions being enacted. And I really am sickened by the way that Bernie especially continues to sell out his base, intentionally, it seems, for the Democrats.
Then they would have been a threat to the establishment, both establishment parties.
And that's how you push them left. That's how you actively push them left.
It would be in the election. Those votes, well, you know, in promises, they would be pushed to the left. But once they get into governance, you know, look at Harris. She changed her position whenever it was convenient for her. They all do that. They have a private and a public policy, according to Hillary. So, and she's not the only one. They're all doing this. But at least you build a real party that can challenge, and you would lose the first time, and you might get Trump, and that's where they would crucify you, because you split the vote, so we got Trump. But you keep building on that, so next time it's a viable party that could win, because 70% of the people are fed up with both parties. And Trump has said numerous times he much preferred to run against anybody but Trump, because Trump has a movement. These other people just, you know, they're just politicians. They have no movement. He didn't want to face Sanders, Trump. He knew what score was.
Exactly.
You know, we take
exactly.
a break, Kathy, and I think we're going to wrap it up when we come back from this break, because I don't believe we're going to get any more results today. And we were fortunate to have two good guests, Giorgio Cafiero and Kim.com. We were hoping to get Pepe, but Pepe is in Bangkok, and it's just gone 8 a.m. there. So if we don't get Pepe to talk about the view from Asia, I will contact him again. I just did a little while ago. So can we take a break, Elizabeth? Oh, sorry.
Absolutely.
Elizabeth, thank you.
All right.
And we'll be back. So welcome back to CN Live's 2020 election coverage. I'm Joe Lauria. I'm with Elizabeth Voss. Right now, we have an announcement that was made that Nevada will announce its results tomorrow at noon their time, which is 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's when we're going to come back on the air tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we will have the Nevada results. We don't know about Arizona. Okay, they have said they will update results around 9 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. That's half an hour from now.
Wow.
Arizona. I wonder if we ought to stay on the air till that.
Yeah, well, Pepe might show up.
And Pepe might show up. That means if we get an Arizona result tomorrow, Nevada's result, if Biden wins Arizona and then he wins Nevada, he's going to be the winner of the election, declared winner by the networks, and that means Trump will continue his legal actions, but we're going to have a provisional winner anyway. I would imagine the actual winner, Joe Biden, who still has 253 electoral votes to 214. For Trump, by the way, in the Senate race, it's still stuck at 48 for the Republicans and 47 for the Democrats, and the House still has 204 to 189 lead. They're 14 votes short in the House of maintaining, their majority, whereas the Democrats would need at least 3 more votes, so 3 more seats rather, to get a 50%, 4 more to become a majority party. But with Biden, they'd have the vote, so they would be in the majority in the Senate. So we could hang out here a little bit longer, Elizabeth, if you'd like.
That's fine with me.
In 20 minutes, when Arizona is supposed to update the results, but they may not do that. Okay, any viewers still hanging around with us? If you want, we're going to go back to music and come back at the top of the hour with the Arizona update, if indeed there is one. And if there isn't, we'll sign off then. So if you want to go and do something else and come back in 20 minutes at the top of the hour, we'll have the Arizona results for you. And then we will end this webcast, and we're going to resume at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, when Nevada is supposed to report, and that could be the moment when Biden is declared the winner. And then we're going to see how Trump reacts to that. Maybe I should keep his Twitter feed open. Elizabeth, what do you think?
Absolutely.
Has he tweeted anything recently? He's probably got his fingers poised right over the keyboard while the Nevada results come in.
Interestingly, it doesn't. I checked just a few minutes ago. For the last I saw, he had not tweeted. He had posted an article about an hour ago and retweeted a couple of people, but he hasn't been, full of the usual bluster. I'm at this very moment checking his feed once again. Yeah, an hour ago, he tweeted out a link from Breitbart titled, with the article titled, "Demands Arise for PA Attorney General to Step Aside." Before that, he's retweeted a tweet by Kevin McCarthy. So he hasn't been, other than that, it was just 2 hours ago, he tweeted, quote, "Our lawyers have asked for meaningful access, but what good does that do? The damage has already been done to the integrity of our system and to the presidential election itself. This is what should be discussed." So that was the last tweet that he really authored himself.
This Breitbart story, I'm bringing it up now. The demands are rising for the Attorney General of Pennsylvania to step aside. He's trying to, quote, "steal Pennsylvania from Trump." And it says calls for Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro, Democrat, step aside after rising after he urged voters to seek election help from Democrats mere days after stating that if all the votes are added up in PA, Trump is going to lose. Shapiro drew strong reactions across social media after encouraging voters to seek election help from Democrats. What does that mean, to seek election help from Democrats on election day? And then they quote him as saying on social media, "Need help with your ballot, with your mail-in ballot, finding out where to vote or something else? Call the Pennsylvania Democrat Voter Assistance Hotline. Someone will answer and help you." I see. So as the Attorney General, even though he's Democrat, supposed to be neutral, he shouldn't be telling prospective voters where to call to find out how to vote. So, and then they have the tweet here from him back on November 3rd on election day at 1 p.m. He wrote that, "Having trouble casting your vote, call the PA Dems voter assistance line." Yeah, so that doesn't look very good for him. Shapiro cannot be seen as having his thumb on the scale, acting in the dual roles of legal arbiter of the vote and a candidate deeply invested in its outcome. Pennsylvania GOP Attorney General candidate Heather Heidelberg called on Shapiro to step aside, and she said what I just quoted, that he can't have his thumb on the scale. She called on the Attorney General to, quote, "appoint a trusted and impartial deputy to oversee any legal questions and disputes in which that office might play a role." Concern is, of course, all this might be just a moot point if Biden wins Nevada and Arizona. He could lose Pennsylvania. It doesn't matter. But Trump can get Pennsylvania, still lose. So, but that's a breaking story there, if you can call it that. So Trump he's not tweeting. That's a bad sign for him. Maybe he's rolling up in a bowl somewhere in deep depression.
Chateau Bow Wow.
He's in the Chateau Bow Wow, with the doghouse.
Or yelling at somebody behind the scenes, as we heard allegations that Hillary Clinton was on the night that she lost.
I was thinking the exact same thing, and that she threw an ashtray across the room and this kind of thing. Yep. Yeah. She got drunk and she was screaming and breaking things, and somehow I could believe it. Now, the lawyers have asked for meaningful access, Trump tweeted 2 hours ago, but what good does that do? The damage has already been done to the integrity of our system and to the presidential election itself. This is what should be discussed, exclamation point. And then he wrote an hour before that, "We have claimed for electoral vote purposes the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which won't allow legal observers, the state of Georgia and the state of North Carolina, each of which has a big, capital BIG, Trump lead. Additionally, we hereby claim the state of Michigan if, in fact, it stops." And then Twitter put in, "Official sources may not have called the race when this was tweeted." And then another one is blocked. Oh, it says some or all this content shared in the tweet is disputed. You can't see it if you hit view, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Additionally, we hereby claim the state of Michigan if, in fact, there was a large number of secretly dubbed ballots, as has been widely reported. So, what is he calling on? Oh, we claim that Michigan is not making sense, which.
Yeah, that was the older tweet where basically he's claiming a win in Michigan and that type of, and Georgia and North Carolina.
My view is he's going to lose these appeals, these legal challenges, and he will just whimper out. He'll be complaining he was cheated, but there's nothing he can do. I don't see anybody having to go into the White House to arrest him or marshal. Do you?
No, I don't. And I do see we have one question in the chat on whether we think Biden will sign up to new nuclear treaties with Russia. And my quick opinion is no, mostly because of the bitter taste in the mouth of the media and Democratic establishment politicians around Russiagate, fake though that was.
Yeah, but Peter Kuznick yesterday, the historian from American University, said that he believed Biden would. I think Biden has on the campaign trail or in his platform, whatever, has said he supports that. So that's an open question. He might do it. I mean, it's the kind of move that an establishment politician might make. Again, it leaves thousands of nukes on both sides, but it's a good move if he can do it. And Giorgio was talking about, when we were talking about the Iran deal, I don't think he mentioned that Biden would probably, he did. He said it would be complicated. I wanted to ask him, and I didn't, a little bit more detail why he thought that would be complicated. I guess you'd have to have Congress to go along, and that might not be easy if the Republicans still control the Senate. And then you have to reconstruct the whole thing. You know, Trump has been talking about replacing the nuclear deal with something else, and he never really came up with something else. So to restore that, basically what Biden would have to do is lift the sanctions again, the reimpose sanctions on Iran. The deal called for the sanctions to be lifted in exchange for stringent new controls on their nuclear enrichment program and a reduction of the amount that they can enrich. And Iran, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, was fulfilling their side of the bargain. So therefore, those sanctions were lifted. So what Biden can do is make sure that Iran is going back to compliance completely, and then lift the sanctions again. I think he could do that unilaterally, I'm pretty sure. But maybe he needs congressional approval to sign a new treaty, or just re-enter the one that exists. I'm sure that there would have to be a new one. Anyway, those are some significant changes. That was probably Obama's biggest foreign policy. It was, I think, his biggest foreign policy achievement to get that Iran deal, to have the guts to make a deal with Iran, given the climate in this country about Iran. And Biden might very well want to follow up on that, which would be good. But it was at a price. I think the war on Yemen was part of the price for that deal. That's my opinion. So we're about 15 minutes out. We could put that music back on for 16 minutes. We'll be back at the top of the hour for any viewers who are still hanging around. And we'll talk about any update in Arizona. And then we'll sign out for today and be back 3 p.m. tomorrow Eastern Standard Time. Okay, we're back here live at CN Live, covering the 2020 U.S. presidential election. New numbers have been released in Arizona from Maricopa County, where Phoenix is located, the largest city in the state, most populous county. And the figures are that Joe Biden picked up 887,451 votes, and Trump got 802,162. So that has added to Biden's lead in that state. He now has 1.4 million to Trump's 1.36 million. It's a 50.7% over 47.9% lead with 86% counted. It looks like Biden is on his way to Arizona. That would leave Nevada. Nevada would be what he'd need to win to get the presidency. Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia is still up for grabs. Trump can win all of those if Biden holds on in Arizona and takes Nevada. So we're going to come back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when we hope to have Nevada results. Elizabeth?
I just thank everybody for spending their time with us this evening. And I would also encourage you all to like and subscribe and share the video. And I'm specifically asking that not only because, as we know, censorship is going to continue and probably get worse no matter who wins the election, but also because it's very important to beat the censorship of these Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, especially algorithms. Also, it's possible that if you think you have subscribed, you may have been unsubscribed by YouTube. I know on Twitter, I've been unfollowed from people that I know that I followed before. So, thank you again for watching us, and we'll be back tomorrow.
Yes, and while you're sharing, also go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/CN Live, and become a patron to help these broadcasts continue on the U.S. election and other events coming up in our normal CN Live episodes. So for Elizabeth, and Kathy Vogan, our executive producer, this is Joe Lauria. We want to thank Giorgio Cafiero and Kim.com, our guests today. Signing off until 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow, when we might have a winner in this U.S. presidential election.
Get out your notebook. There's more.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you both, and get some sleep.